I'm the highest civilization in the universe. This video is purely for entertainment and does not infringe on copyrights or laws. The rights to the novel and image belong to the original author. We do not claim ownership. Don't like waiting and want to listen to this fanfic in full now? Subscribe to our Patreon, where you'll find the best fanfics. Chapter 351, The Past. According to the records in his memory, Li Ming familiarly shuttled through the construction area until he stopped in front of a nearly circular building. This building is also a crystal structure, but the structure is different from other buildings. If other buildings are high-rise buildings, then this building is just a two-story attic with an irregular prism on the outside, somewhat like a circle. The surface of the crystal is relatively intact, more smooth and shiny than other crystal buildings, and this is where Larsen's memory of the Hukang star of the 6th-domain Mang star is stored. Under the building, there is a black gate, 5 meters high, more than 10 meters long and wide, and the entire gate is covered with white arcs, like an electric grid. Li Ming walked quickly to the gate, looking at the flashing arcs, revealing a puzzled look. Since it is already an abandoned city, why is there a barrier at this gate? Li Ming said to himself, looking at the white arcs in front of him. Such a barrier naturally couldn't stop Li Ming. He slowly raised his right hand, and a green light ball had condensed out of his fingertips. Just as Li Ming was about to do something, the white light barrier in front of him suddenly disappeared with a bang. Li Ming was startled. His eyes narrowed slightly. He looked intently, and at the same time, put his right hand away. The barrier disappeared, and the gate was pitch black, but a figure was slowly walking out. This person walked very slowly, but his basic information was already revealed under his discerning eyes. It was an old alien who came out. The civilization level was only level 9, not even a high-level civilization. The old face showed how long he had lived. His body was trembling, and every step he took was trembling. Such a low-level civilization had no secrets in front of Li Ming. The information of other brains was also mastered by Li Ming. Who are you? The old man stood at the door, looked up at Li Ming, and asked. Li Ming smiled slightly and said, Edwin, I'm a resident of the Alliance headquarters. I just came here to take a look. Oh. Then please. Edwin quickly made a gesture of invitation and said so. Li Ming smiled slightly and didn't care, and walked quickly inside. After passing through the barrier gate outside, the originally darkened side became clear, and portals appeared in front of him. These portals led to other places in the building. Li Ming stopped in front of these portals, looked at each portal with his eyes, and walked towards the one at the edge. According to the information Li Ming got from Edwin, this city has been abandoned for many years, and the civilized tribes that originally lived here have moved to other places. However, this isolated island-like city was also an important experimental base for Larsen. Through various memory fragments and information from Edwin's brain, it is known that Larsen is a very influential person. This person is good at research and development. In human terms, he is a scientist. The difference is that Larsen's main research goals are related to biological civilization. Biological civilization has various tribal branches, which are Larsen's main research objects, the most important of which are synthesis and light medicine. On the planet of Isaiah, where silicon-based life is united, Larsen is unique. As the original leader of biological civilization, he knows the future of silicon-based life. Therefore, studying light medicine and synthesis became his biggest goal. Light medicine can assist the Yabal power civilization and become the most powerful guarantee for war support, while synthesis can provide advanced guarantee and enhance the overall strength of the race. This macro thinking, coupled with its own strength, has made it extremely influential in silicon-based life. But now Larsen has become a giant on the Ruby Star. Except for Li Ming, no one knows his past and his present. Edwin, the old man, used to be Larsen's assistant. Although Larsen is gone, Edwin has always stayed here and has not left with the tribe. At present, the building where Li Ming is located has 4 floors, 2 floors above ground and 2 floors underground. The 2 floors above ground are material areas, but that was only in the past. The materials here have long been taken away with the migration of the tribe, and it is empty. Li Ming walked slowly on the first floor of the building, looking at the empty shelves and decorations here, as if he saw the former glory here. The old man Edwin looked at Li Ming from a distance, without saying a word, but just followed slowly. His old and slow pace could not keep up with Li Ming's pace, so he could only watch from a distance. Li Ming looked casually, and unconsciously turned back to the old man. After looking at the old man, Li Ming smiled and said, "As Larson's assistant, you have been here for so many years. You are really loyal." Edwin smiled and nodded, but soon he was startled, looked at Li Ming, and said in surprise, "You know me?" Li Ming smiled again, did not reply to the other party, and walked directly to one of the portals. Passing through this portal, Li Ming came to the underground floor. This is the synthesis laboratory, which is where Li Ming's memory of the 6-domain Maxing Hukang star book was placed. Although many years have passed, this place has been maintained by Edwin for a long time, so all the facilities are still intact. Li Ming walked around in the empty room casually, and his eyes kept looking around. The room is large and the layout is simple. It is mainly divided into the material area and the synthesis area. Li Ming said as he walked, "Edwin, with your experience following Larson, you can definitely get a good position in your race. Why do you want to stay here?" Edwin sighed slightly, and shook his head gently, then said, "Although this place has been abandoned, I have never left here, since I followed Lord Larson. Although Lord Larson is gone, I still have an obsession with this place." Li Ming nodded without saying anything. His steps were already slowly moving in the material area. What Edwin said was true, and Li Ming saw it all. There are still a lot of materials on the shelves in the material area, but they are all low-level items, and they are all worthless. Otherwise, the tribesmen here will definitely take them away after leaving here. As they walked, Li Ming continued, "I'm quite interested in what you said about Larson's sudden disappearance." When it comes to Larson's disappearance, Edwin's face showed sadness. After a long sigh, he said, "It is indeed a bit strange about the disappearance of Lord Larson. I believe you have heard about it. According to the rumors outside, Lord Larson and Lord Mayo both died during the active period of the volcano on Ruby Star, but I always feel that things are not that simple," the old man said in a long voice. "Oh." Li Ming paused, turned around and looked at Edwin, his face full of curiosity. Edwin did not shy away from this, and continued, "That was many years ago. At that time, the synthesis of Rinxu had entered the final stage. For the safety and concealment of the experiment, Lord Mayo chose Ruby Star, and Lord Larson agreed. Because this synthesis experiment is extremely important, even I cannot participate. Only Lord Larson and Lord Mayo participated. But after that trip, that was the last time I saw Lord Larson." At the end, Edwin suddenly sighed deeply, and became even sadder, as if the memory of the past had hurt his fragile nerves. Li Ming also felt sympathy and regret when he saw this, but his expression was relatively calm, and he said, "In other words, after Larson and Mayo went to Ruby Star, they never came back again." Edwin nodded slightly, and just when he was about to say something, his expression paused, as if he suddenly remembered something, and hurriedly said, "Lord Larson has never come back, but Lord Mayo did come back once in the middle." Huh. Li Ming suddenly frowned, his eyes focused, revealing a look of surprise, staring at Edwin, and said, "You mean, after they went to Ruby Star together, Mayo came back halfway?" Li Ming seemed to be very concerned about this point, and asked with a serious face. Edwin did not answer immediately. After thinking deeply, he nodded and said, "It was a few months after they went to Ruby Star together. Lord Mayo said he would come back to get some materials, and he did take some things from our current material area." Li Ming narrowed his eyes slightly, his expression was serious, and he was already thinking about something in his mind. Chapter 352, Gift. What he saw with his eyes, plus what Edwin said, can be completely confirmed that when Larson and Mayo went to the Ruby Star, Mayo did come back halfway, and took away some materials. But Li Ming was not concerned about those materials. His eyes rolled slightly, and he didn't say anything more. He turned and walked to the depths of the material area. In the depths of the material area, there was a round metal ball, like a jar, with a bright and shiny appearance. When he saw this object, Li Ming's eyes were fixed, because in Larson's memory, this object was the place where the Hukang star registration of the 6-domain Mang star was stored. Li Ming walked forward slowly, looking at this object with his eyes. Then he raised his right hand and lightly tapped his index finger. a green light shot out from his fingertips, and the green light flashed into the metal ball. Then the streamer passed through its surface, and the whole metal ball opened with a bang. Li Ming looked closely and saw a piece of star registration stone the size of an egg lying quietly inside. This made Li Ming suddenly overjoyed, and he stretched out his hand again without hesitation to grab it in the void. The star registration stone floated up and fell into Li Ming's hand. Li Ming looked at the star stone in his hand with excitement, and his whole palm was immediately filled with green light. However, after carefully sensing it, Li Ming's originally excited expression immediately calmed down, his eyes narrowed slightly, and he stared at the starstone in a daze. It's not the Six Realms Mangsing Hukang star. Li Ming's face was eclipsed, and his eyes were full of disappointment, but it was also expected. Edwin saw this, and did not feel strange, but just said, the content of this starstone is quite profound, and no one in our tribe can understand it, so it was left here. Li Ming nodded gently, without saying a word, but his eyes had already begun to continue to check the content of the starstone. After just a quick glance, Li Ming clenched his palm, and put the star book away. Then he smiled and said, I can understand the content of this star book, and it is quite interesting. I will send it to you after I finish reading it. Edwin didn't seem to care. After a long sigh, he said, if you like it, just take it. Since this thing has been abandoned by our people, it is naturally useless. Li Ming smiled lightly, turned around and walked out, and said, after all, this is your thing from Isaiah. I will definitely send it back after reading it. It's almost time. I have to go. As he said this, Li Ming's figure had already arrived in front of the previous portal, and then flashed out of the portal. After leaving the building, Li Ming returned to his aircraft, and started it without any hesitation and left quickly. Li Ming took the aircraft, and went straight to the Alliance headquarters, but he was still thinking about the matter of Hukang Star Book of 6 Domain Mangstar. Among them, the one that Li Ming was most concerned about was a guy named Mayo. Li Ming had learned from Larsen's memory that Larsen and Mayo had advanced together. Mayo's advancement was successful, but Larsen's advancement failed. Larsen became a giant, but Mayo's whereabouts were unknown, and his life or death was unknown. However, based on previous knowledge, since Mayo's advancement was successful, his strength must have greatly increased, and the probability of dying on the Ruby Star was almost impossible. This person also returned to the Isaiah Star during this period, so this person is very likely to have taken the Hukang Star classification of the 6 domains Mangstar. If Li Ming wants to get the star classification, then he needs to find Mayo. Although he is a little disappointed, there is no other way now, so he can only temporarily give up the Hukang Star classification. But Li Ming did not gain nothing on this trip, because Li Ming also got another star classification. The content of this star classification is exactly the light medicine ability that Larsen has studied for many years. Of course, this kind of star classification is extremely rare, just like the inherited star classification that Li Ming got from the Tillmans before. The most important thing is that this kind of advanced star classification is even more unreadable by ordinary people. Thinking about this, Li Ming's aircraft has returned to the Alliance base. Now Li Ming can go anywhere he wants with his permanent status. This convenience and freedom also highlights his status. The aircraft came directly to Li Ming's residence. Next to the building is a parking space. This is Li Ming's separate area. Even if it is parked, it can only be Li Ming's own aircraft. However, when Li Ming was parking, 3 aircraft appeared in Li Ming's separate area. The parking space is not small, but the presence of other foreign aircraft means that other people have come to Li Ming's location. After parking the aircraft, Li Ming walked down and went straight to the building. As soon as he entered the door of the first floor of the building, 3 figures were already waiting in the lobby. These 3 people were not unfamiliar. 2 of them were Obson and Elks, and the other one Li Ming had only seen, but did not know, which was Valentine. Li Ming had met Valentine in the corridor when he just came back from Hangaya Star. This person did not leave a good impression on Li Ming at that time. He appeared at this time, but he didn't know why. The 3 were talking, and Robson inadvertently turned his eyes to the door, and immediately his expression brightened, and he said excitedly, I'm back, I'm back, Li Ming is back. As he said this, Robson hurriedly went to meet him, and Elks and Valentine followed without hesitation. Li Ming smiled at Robson, but soon turned his eyes to Valentine and said with a puzzled look, "Grand Mage Robson, you are here to find me for something?" Robson smiled, glanced at Valentine beside him, and then said, "This is Valentine from the Rulan Galaxy. He has always been the fourth combat power in our alliance. This time he found our Tillman and wanted to congratulate you in person on becoming a permanent resident." "Oh." Li Ming smiled lightly, turned his eyes, and looked at Valentine, but Li Ming did not have a good impression of this person. Li Ming still remembered the incident in the corridor last time. Valentine was smiling at this time, looking at Li Ming with respectful eyes, and immediately took 2 steps forward, bowed his hands, and said, "It is a great honor for our alliance that the great magician Li Ming can become a permanent resident of our alliance. On behalf of the Rulan Galaxy, I specially present a small gift, and I hope you will accept it." As he said this, Valentine raised his hand and handed over a star bag. Li Ming turned his eyes and looked at the star bag handed over by the other party. After smiling slightly, he raised his hand to take it. Holding the star bag in his hand, Li Ming smiled and then clenched his palm and put it away. Turning his gaze back to Valentine, he smiled and said, "We are all in the same alliance, so why should we be so polite? I will accept your kindness. In the future, we Tillmans and your Rulan Galaxy will naturally cooperate more." Seeing Li Ming's smile, Valentine finally felt relieved. After secretly breathing a sigh of relief, he said, "Sure, sure." Li Ming then looked at the 3 people in front of him and turned around to return to his room through the portal. However, as soon as Li Ming turned around, Robertson suddenly raised his hand, as if he wanted to say something but stopped. Li Ming paused, glanced at him, and said, "What? Grand Mage Robertson, do you have anything else to say?" Robertson smiled and said, "Some trivial matters I want to report to you." Hearing this, Li Ming narrowed his eyes slightly, and his wisdom ability had been activated, but his expression did not change. After hesitating for a while, he said, "Then let's talk in my room." With that, Li Ming directly entered the portal and disappeared. Robson took 2 steps forward and was about to enter the portal, but Valentine stepped forward and said, "Mage Robson, that matter." Robson smiled and said, "Since Li Ming has accepted your things, I think your offense against him will probably be over. I will go up and say a few good words for you, and it won't be a big deal." Valentine nodded slightly and relaxed. Robson said, and then he entered the portal. A light flashed, and a person came in through the portal in Li Ming's room. It was Robertson. Li Ming was sitting in front of the meteorite table at this time. After seeing Robertson, he slowly stood up and said, "What did Grand Mage Robertson want to say just now? You can say it now." Robertson came to the work table with a smile on his face and sat down with Li Ming. But as soon as he sat down, he showed a worried look. After hesitating for a while, he said, "What happened with the Enna people? No one knows, right?" Hearing this, Li Ming laughed several times and said, "Grand Mage Robertson is really too cautious. I have become a permanent resident. What else can happen? If you are still worried, then I will kick them out of the alliance." Chapter 353, Retreat. When he was on the Ruby Star, Li Ming killed 3 high-ranking members of the Enna people in one fell swoop. Once the rest of the alliance knew about this, the consequences would be disastrous. Robertson was naturally very worried, but now that he was a permanent resident, how could Li Ming care about these things? He looked at Robertson in front of him and said calmly, "You don't have to worry about these things. Everything is under my control." Robertson was relieved and breathed a sigh of relief. Robertson had seen Li Ming's methods, but he had not seen Li Ming since they parted at the teleportation point on the Ruby Star. He didn't expect that. As soon as he returned to the Alliance, he got the information that Li Ming had become a permanent resident. Seeing Li Ming's confident expression, Robertson was completely relieved. After hesitating for a while, he flipped his hand and took out a star bag, then smiled slightly and placed the star bag in front of Li Ming. Li Ming took a look at the star bag and looked puzzled. Without waiting for Li Ming to say anything, Robson said quickly, "These are gifts from various star systems." Li Ming's eyes naturally saw through all of this, but he did not say it out loud. He smiled and picked up the star bag. Looking at the star bag, Li Ming couldn't help but secretly thought, this alien actually uses this trick. Li Ming had already sensed the things in the star bag. Like what Valentine gave him, they were all the power of flowing clouds. He watched with his eyes and clenched his palm to collect it. Seeing Li Ming accept it, Robertson also smiled and said, if these people hadn't come to me to give me this gift, I wouldn't have known that you were already a permanent resident of our alliance. Now our galaxy has an extraordinary status in the alliance. This is all thanks to you. Li Ming smiled and waved his hand, saying, Grand Mage Robertson, you are too polite. Since I have joined the Tillmans, my glory is naturally the glory of the Tillmans. This is a matter of course. Robertson naturally waved his hand and replied, this time we Tillmans really want to thank you. The gift is now in your hands, and my mission is considered completed. Delks and I will still go back to the Fish and Fire Galaxy in a few days. After all, the galactic war is about to come, and we must be fully prepared. Li Ming nodded slightly, but his eyes turned, and he suddenly thought of something, and said, since you are going to return to the Fish and Fire star system, before that, there is something I need to give you to do. Robertson immediately became energetic after hearing this, and said, if you have any needs, just tell me, and I will do my best. Li Ming laughed and said, it's just a small matter. I have a list of materials. Please buy some materials for me. As he said this, Li Ming handed over a starstone with a list of materials. Robertson took it without even looking at it and said, okay, I'll do it right away. As he said this, Robertson left with satisfaction. Li Ming just stayed where he was, smiling and saying nothing. Robertson was now very happy to serve Li Ming. He was willing to help Li Ming do something. Li Ming's eyes had seen through this thought. After all, Li Ming's permanent status had brought a galaxy that was about to be eliminated by the Alliance to the top of the Alliance. It was an existence that all other galaxies envied. This huge change in status also showed the degree of participation of the galaxy in the future, shared resources of the Alliance. Which galaxy would not like such a person? The materials that Li Ming asked Robson to buy were all used to refine the Luang pill. The Luang pill was a pill that strengthened the body. Its most important basic material was the U energy that Li Ming obtained from the Ruby Star. According to the records of the Advanced Alchemy Star book that Li Ming mastered, the Luang pill was a pill that maximized the U energy. There were many ways to use the U energy, and there were also many types of pills to refine, but the effects of pills of different levels were different. The Luang pill was a pill that maximized its effectiveness. However, the procedures for refining the Luang pill were cumbersome and complicated, and ordinary alchemists naturally could not complete it. But as long as the refining was successful, taking one pill would be enough to have a body that could rival the power civilization. As a master of alchemy, Li Ming naturally wanted to maximize its effectiveness. Robson went to help Li Ming buy materials, while Li Ming sat down in the room and began to practice the Guangaio star book that he had just obtained. This light medicine star book belongs to the advanced star book. Li Ming needs to use his wisdom ability to read it. Of course, this kind of star book is also an item that Li Ming needs very much. In the following time, Li Ming once again opened his closed door mode, practicing star books and refining pills. It was not the first time that Li Ming heard about the upcoming galactic war. The galactic war may be related to every life in the entire Milky Way, and Li Ming is no exception. In order to ensure his own safety, Li Ming must make full preparations. In addition to refining Luangdan, Li Ming also has to refine Liuandan. Liuandan is an energy supply pill used by advanced civilizations. It is indispensable for fighting. Li Ming has experienced it deeply in the battle with Biggs. The energy in his body was almost exhausted many times because of the lack of Liuandan. Li Ming handed over the materials for refining the pill to Robson, but this is not a long-term solution. After Robson returns to the Yuhuo galaxy, Li Ming will find the materials himself. At this time, the materials are already very important. After all, the war is about to come, and any materials related to the war become precious at this time. Fortunately, Li Ming was relatively wealthy, so he still had to buy it, even though it was a bit expensive. In this way, Li Ming's figure appeared in the trade area of the Alliance and in his own residence, and he devoted all his mind to cultivation and alchemy. In fact, not only Li Ming, but also the advanced civilizations of the entire Milky Way were already busy. All kinds of high-tech weapons and warships were in wartime. Every galaxy and every place where advanced civilizations gathered had entered the most urgent state. Li Ming only practiced and ignored what was happening outside. Time flew by, and it was unknown how long it had passed. Li Ming had been in seclusion in his room, refining 3 Luang pills and dozens of Liu iron pills. At the same time, he also learned a healing ability, Ghost Key, in the Light Medicine Starbook. In addition, Li Ming also relearned the Inheritance Starbook of the Tillman people and continuously deepened the abilities of both. In Li Ming's view, as long as no one disturbed him, he could practice endlessly. After all, there were abundant resources and abundant energy here. Isn't this the environment he wanted most after entering the central system? However, not long after, the console in Li Ming's room suddenly flashed blue light, and a message was transmitted. This made Li Ming, who was in cultivation, slowly open his eyes, and his eyeballs turned, looking at the position of the console. He stood up and walked over slowly, raised his hand, and tapped the console, and a message composed of alien characters had emerged. It's coming. It's finally coming. Li Ming whispered to himself, narrowed his eyes slightly, and walked towards the portal. After hesitating for a while, leaving his residence, the streets outside were full of troops walking back and forth. The atmosphere of war was already very strong, and everyone was busy. This was very different from before Li Ming's retreat. Riding on a flying vehicle, Li Ming went directly to the conference building. At this time, Li Ming was no longer the same as before. The soldiers of the troops saluted when they saw Li Ming. Li Ming's permanent identity had been announced. Not only all the galaxy members of the alliance, but also other alliances knew about it. This was an opportunity for an alliance to reveal its strength to the outside world, especially at this critical moment. Entering the conference building from the entrance, and then going straight to the largest conference room from the corridor, every soldier who saw Li Ming stood in awe. This kind of high-ranking treatment made Li Ming feel very comfortable, as if he was a leader, and any look at him was admiration and awe. But a light sound was heard, and the portal of the conference room flashed, and Li Ming's figure had already appeared. The conference room here was different from the place where the energy was dueled before. It was a separate closed room, not a certain space. A conference table that was more than 10 meters long and wide was in the middle of the room. Seeing Li Ming's arrival, these people stood up and looked over. Everyone had a look of awe on their faces. No one dared to ignore Li Ming anymore. Even Yarborough stood up in person. There were already 10 people sitting around the huge round conference table. Li Ming's seat was next to Yarborough. These people were also representatives of the member galaxies of the Alliance. Their eyes were fixed on Li Ming until Li Ming came to his seat, and then these people sat down. Chapter 354, Blue Hole. All members gathered, and Yarborough glanced at everyone in turn, then said, I believe everyone is clear about the purpose of today's meeting, which is to deal with the upcoming galactic war. According to the information we have, in this galactic war, we will face attacks from 3 galaxies, namely the Large Magellanic Cloud, the Small Magellanic Cloud, and the Pegasus Galaxy. At this point, Yarborough raised his hand and pointed at the conference table in the middle. Blue light flashed, and countless blue lines shot out from the table. After these slender lines intertwined, they formed a galaxy picture. The picture showed the position and coordinates of the Milky Way and the other 3 galaxies. The Milky Way is the largest galaxy, while the other 3 galaxies are relatively small. The Large and Small Magellanic Clouds in the Pegasus Galaxy are satellite galaxies of the Milky Way, and belong to large galaxies. The so-called large galaxies are galaxies that contain many star systems. For example, the Milky Way has countless star systems, and the human solar system is one of them. The Large and Small Magellanic Clouds in the Pegasus Galaxy are both large galaxies, but they contain fewer star systems. The civilizations in the 3 galaxies crossed tens of thousands of light years to enter the Milky Way because of resources. After showing the galaxy picture, Yarborough continued, this time, they will use the blue hole to directly cross the starry sky to our galaxy, just like last time. In view of the combat experience last time, we will adopt a new strategy this time. At this point, Yarborough raised his right hand and pointed again. The blue light on the table then weaved and intertwined again, magnifying the pattern of the Milky Way dozens of times. At this time, the structure of the entire Milky Way has appeared directly above the table. This picture slowly rotates in the air, as if the real Milky Way is right in front of us. Yarborough continued, based on the experience last time, destroying the blue hole can reduce the time for the enemy to enter the Milky Way and provide us with opportunities and time to counterattack. In other words, when we detect that a blue hole may appear in a certain airspace, we will immediately send someone to destroy it and strangle it in the cradle. At this point, Yarborough's eyes turned slightly and glanced at the others. At this time, some light spots began to emerge in the picture of the Milky Way in the sky. These light spots were red and there were many of them. They were in various corners of the Milky Way, some in the outer system and some in the middle system. Yarborough continued, this is the blue hole distribution map we obtained after sharing information with other alliances. The information of all alliances will always be in the sharing stage to ensure that we have a grasp of the location of the blue hole. You can take a look first. Yarborough continued. At this time, everyone at the table focused their eyes and carefully looked at the location of each red dot. After all, wherever the red dot appears, there may be a blue hole. These people naturally want to see if there is a blue hole near their galaxy. Li Ming narrowed his eyes slightly and observed carefully. The accuracy of this information is basically unquestionable, because at this critical moment, the monitoring information between all alliances is shared, and even if there is an error, it will not be too large. As for the blue hole, Li Ming also knows that the blue hole is a kind of interstellar transmission ability, just like opening a portal between the stars, with a super long transmission distance. Looking at the rotating Milky Way in front of him, Li Ming's expression was indifferent, because Li Ming was different from those people. They all had their own galaxies they cared about, but Li Ming did not. Even the Yuhuo galaxy was only a nominal joining of Li Ming, and he did not really make it his own galaxy. But just as Li Ming was watching the Milky Way pattern, a blue hole light spot suddenly caught Li Ming's attention. Looking at the location of the blue hole, Li Ming's eyes widened a little, his eyebrows slightly wrinkled, and he took a deep breath, whispering, "This is." As he said this, Li Ming couldn't help but stand up, and at the same time, he pointed his right hand, and the Milky Way picture that was originally rotating suddenly stopped rotating, as if the pause button was pressed. Li Ming's face was solemn, and his eyes were fixed on the red dot, and his whole body was motionless. Li Ming's unusual behavior also attracted the attention of others, because everyone was looking for their own galaxy and blue hole point with the rotation of the Milky Way, and no one dared to stop and watch it, because that would affect others. But Li Ming seemed to no longer care about these, with a straight body and focused eyes, looking at the location of a certain light spot, as if in a daze, and at the same time he raised his right hand again and pointed again. After this point, the location of the blue hole was immediately magnified several times, and a star system appeared in front of Li Ming. At this time, Li Ming had clearly seen the whole picture of this galaxy, but the clearer he saw, the uglier his face looked, and he couldn't help whispering, it's the solar system." His face was pale, and Li Ming slowly sat back in his seat, his head down, his eyes dull, thinking about something. At this time, the Milky Way pattern had returned to its original state and continued to rotate, but Li Ming just sat there without saying a word. Li Ming's strange behavior made everyone else stunned, and even a few people were whispering and talking. Even Abel cast a strange look at Li Ming. After a while, Yeager, who was sitting next to Li Ming, smiled slightly and said, "What's wrong, Li Ming? Is there anything wrong?" Li Ming came to his senses after hearing this, and also noticed the strangeness of the other people at the table. After a slight smile, he waved his hand and said, "Nothing, everyone continue." Yeager didn't ask any more questions after hearing this, but just glanced at Abel. Abel was still staring at Li Ming, but soon turned his gaze to the pattern of the Milky Way and said, "What you are seeing now is a distribution of blue holes in the early stage. There will inevitably be more and more blue holes in the later stage, but it is time for us to take action and destroy all the blue holes that pose the greatest threat to us." After saying this, Abel glanced at everyone again and said, "Now all major alliances are discussing the destruction of blue holes. Today we must determine the attack targets of each galaxy and then share the attack targets with other alliances." Everyone heard this, said nothing, but whispered to each other. Yabble just looked at everyone and didn't say much, but Zenny, who was sitting next to Yabble, rolled his eyes and said, "Commander Yabble, what should we do about the blue hole targets in the outer systems?" Yabble paused after hearing this, but quickly nodded and said, "I have already communicated with other alliances about the blue hole targets in the outer systems. The resources in the outer systems are relatively few, and there are planetary belts between them and the central system. Even if they are invaded, they will not threaten us in a short time. However, there are indeed several larger blue holes in the outer systems. We speculate that the enemy will use these large blue holes to occupy the outer systems first, and then try to cooperate with the central system's blue hole joint attack." Yabble continued. Zenel also looked worried after hearing this. After hesitating and thinking for a moment, he said, "If the outer system is really occupied by them, then these people can attack or defend, which is very disadvantageous to us." Yarborough nodded and continued, "So we decided that each alliance will be responsible for a large blue hole in the outer system. As for those small blue holes, let the outer civilizations deal with them themselves." Zenel nodded after hearing this, and said nothing more. At this time, each galaxy seemed to have found the blue hole they wanted to attack, and marked some red dots one after another. After seeing this, Yarborough swept his eyes across everyone's faces and said solemnly, "Our alliance needs to be responsible for a large blue hole in the outer system. Who of you will go?" Everyone fell silent after this question. After all, the affairs of the alliance and the affairs of their own galaxy are two different things. If it is a blue hole near their own galaxy, even if they encounter enemies when destroying it, they can ask the alliance for help. But if they run to the outer system and encounter enemies, they can only fight to the death, and no one will come to help. One is the interests of one's own galaxy, and the other is one's own life. Putting the two together, no one is willing to go to an outer system. Chapter 355, Solar System. Seeing this, Yaba snorted in dissatisfaction and said, "When you divide the resources on weekdays, you all say how strong and powerful you are. Now, you have become cowards for such a small matter?" Yaba's face was full of anger and dissatisfaction, but despite what he said, these people remained silent, and sometimes looked at each other. No one was willing to step forward. Yaba's eyes swept across the faces of these people again, and said coldly, "Since none of you said anything, it seems that I can only decide for you." Everyone was still silent after hearing this. Obviously, no one was willing to step forward. If they were pointed out by Yaba, they could only find excuses to shirk. Li Ming naturally saw the thoughts of these people. Under his wise eyes, those little thoughts and ideas naturally could not escape. "I'll go," Li Ming suddenly said. This sentence made almost everyone present breathe a sigh of relief, and at the same time, they all cast smiles and grateful eyes to Li Ming. After hearing what Li Ming said, a barrel couldn't help but look at Li Ming and said, "Li Ming, are you really going?" Li Ming smiled slightly, took a deep breath, and said, "As the new permanent resident of the Alliance, it is natural for me to stand up and share the worries of the Alliance at this critical moment." As soon as these words came out, almost everyone nodded and admired Li Ming even more. But Li Ming said again, "Although I have decided to go, I have two conditions. I don't know if our alliance can agree to them." Upon hearing the conditions, everyone was stunned and looked at each other in confusion. Abel also showed doubt in his eyes and said, "Then you tell me first." Li Ming raised his right hand and pointed at the galaxy map in front of him. One of the red dots was marked, and then he said, "I will only destroy this big blue hole, and I will not go to the others. This requires Commander Abel to communicate with other alliances." Abel hesitated after hearing this, as if thinking about something. After a few seconds, he nodded vigorously and replied, "I promise you this. Whether other alliances choose this big blue hole or not, I will help you convince them." Li Ming nodded with satisfaction and continued, "I won't say much about the risks of this trip, so I hope the alliance can provide me with some resources." Upon hearing this condition, before Abel said anything, Zenir on the side said first, "Of course, this is certain. Even if you don't say it, our alliance will provide you with a lot of resources." Both conditions were met, and Li Ming smiled with satisfaction and said, "Since the conditions can be met, there will be no problem on my side." Yarborough nodded, looked at the Milky Way pattern in front of him, and said, I'm relieved that Li Ming will go to the outer system. The coordinates of everyone's attack are also marked properly. Then I will share this information with other alliances. As for the final result, I will inform you. Having said so, Yarborough stood up first and said, today's meeting ends here. Everyone should go back and prepare first. As soon as the voice fell, everyone stood up and left. Li Ming walked out, still looking worried. The outer blue hole that Li Ming chose is the blue hole in the solar system. The Earth in the solar system is Li Ming's home planet. Li Ming didn't know how long it had been since he left the Earth. But seeing that his home planet was threatened by alien civilizations, Li Ming still felt sad. At this time, Li Ming could also appreciate the aliens who cared about his own galaxy. This was a kind of bond between his hometown and home. Whenever he heard the information related to this, he would unconsciously yearn for it. Moreover, this time it was a crisis, and Li Ming naturally had to go back to help the Earth and eliminate the crisis. Thinking about this, Li Ming had returned to his residence and sat quietly at the table in the room. Li Ming's mood was actually a little complicated at the moment, with excitement and a little uneasiness. He was excited about returning to the Earth, and he was uneasy about what kind of aliens would be in this big blue hole, and whether his ability was enough to deal with it. These distracting thoughts just flashed in his mind and passed. Li Ming shook his head slightly, and did not think about it carefully. Then Li Ming returned to calmness again, and he continued to practice his own star identity every day. In addition, Li Ming took a Luang pill to maximize the strength of his body. After practicing for a few days, Li Ming received a message from Yarborough. After consultations between Yarborough and other alliances, the Great Blue Hole selected by Li Ming has been handed over to the Hua Alliance to destroy. At the same time, the Alliance also provided Li Ming with an independent spacecraft and a large amount of resources, so Li Ming can set off at any time. There is no need to choose an auspicious day for such a thing. Once this information is confirmed, Li Ming will start his interstellar journey by driving the spacecraft. The spacecraft driven by Li Ming is a round silver spacecraft, which is also a high-tech product of the Hua Alliance. It has sound coordinates and a very long transmission distance. After setting the coordinates, all Li Ming has to do is wait quietly. At this moment, a blue flame suddenly burned in an airspace not far from the Earth in the solar system. The flame burned by itself in the vacuum and slowly spread around, just like a piece of paper being ignited from the middle. The flame burned very slowly, the hole was blue, and the spread was also very slow. The burning direction was irregular, sometimes round and sometimes square. The burned places would become blue light curtains, which were completely different from other airspaces. From a distance, it seemed as if the flame was washing the space, and the range gradually expanded. The blue light curtain is not transparent, but like a blue mirror, from which the starry sky of other places can be reflected. In an airspace tens of thousands of light years away, a huge space station is also carrying out this operation. This space station is in a ring shape, like a bicycle tire. The middle of the ring is also burning with a blue flame, but the flame is surrounded by blue arcs, which are connected to the ring, like the spring inside a bicycle tire. Under the action of the blue arc, the blue flame is stretched and enlarged little by little, as if a crack is torn in a vacuum. Not far from the center of the ring, there is an elliptical black spaceship quietly parked. This spaceship is not large, more than 30 meters long and only a dozen meters wide. Although the appearance of the spaceship is elliptical, the surface of the spaceship is very soft, just like the surface of water. Sometimes there are fluctuations, giving people the feeling that this spaceship is a drop of black ink in the air. At this time, inside the spaceship, an alien in the main cabin is talking to a spherical object. This spherical object is similar to its spaceship, and it also floats in the air of the cabin like water. This object is the operating table. Compared to those operating tables fixed inside the spacecraft, or floating operating mirrors, this operating table is naturally much more advanced. It can not only float at will, but also change its shape. Because it is liquid, it can present any picture. This alien is ugly. His head is similar to an inverted triangle. The top of the head is parallel. The chin is the most pointed part of the triangle. He has a pair of big black eyes like light bulbs, and his curved mouth is full of sharp teeth. His whole body is slender and more than 2 meters tall. In addition to 2 thick arms, his upper body has more than a dozen tentacles. His lower legs are as thick and powerful as 2 pillars. A pair of eyes looked at the floating operating water and said, "I'm ready. As long as the blue hole opens, I can set off." In the operating water was a blurry image. The person's appearance could not be seen clearly, only a rough outline. After nodding slightly, he said, "Brendan, as a pioneer, your mission is to protect the blue hole and place the wormhole. I don't want to hear any news of accidents." Brendan's mouth corners slightly raised, revealing a sinister smile, and said, "Don't worry, the outer systems of the Milky Way are all low-level civilizations. For me, this is just a small matter." As soon as the voice fell, the blurry figure flashed in the operating water and disappeared directly. Brendan turned his eyes and looked at the blue hole that was gradually opening, and a hideous smile appeared on his face again. Chapter 356 Liquid Spaceship Swallowed. In an airspace within the solar system, the space fluctuated like scattered water ripples. After a muffled bang, a round spaceship suddenly appeared. The ripples disappeared, and the round spaceship stopped in place. Li Ming in the main cabin looked at the operating table in front of him. The Earth and the moon were clearly visible. Seeing this blue planet at this time, Li Ming's heart was already mixed with various emotions, which were difficult to describe. At this time, Li Ming was no longer using the teleportation function, but switched to flying mode to slowly approach the Earth. It is said to be approaching slowly. With the speed of the silver spaceship, it will not take too long to reach the Earth. This feeling of seeing the Earth again is like seeing my hometown again after many years. As the spaceship slowly approached the Earth, Li Ming began to search for his main target of this trip, the blue hole, on the operating table. The blue light flashed on the operating table, and the circles of ripples were the search marks. The blue hole, a space transmission device containing huge energy, is easy to be discovered. It takes a long time from its opening to direct transmission. The farther the distance, the greater the energy consumption and the longer it takes. Its appearance is obvious, just like throwing an impurity in pure water. After a simple scan, Li Ming indeed found something strange. There was a slowly expanding blue hole near the Earth. As soon as the target appeared, Li Ming immediately became nervous, staring at the console with his eyes, as if facing a great enemy, and a clear picture was also presented on the console bit by bit. Without saying anything, Li Ming pointed directly at the coordinates of the blue hole, intending to teleport directly there. But just as Li Ming was about to start the teleportation, another light spot near the blue hole caught Li Ming's attention, which made Li Ming pause. He did not teleport immediately, but pointed at the void on the console to see what was going on. The area was gradually enlarged on the console, and Li Ming could see clearly at this time that there was an elliptical spaceship next to the blue hole. Li Ming monitored the other party, and the other party also monitored Li Ming. The distance between the two was not far, but the other party seemed to be indifferent, as if he did not take Li Ming seriously at all. But Li Ming frowned when he saw this situation, thinking, could it be that the invaders from other galaxies have already arrived in the solar system? Thinking of this, Li Ming did not dare to hesitate any longer, and this time he directly locked the location of the blue hole and quickly started the transmission. The silver spaceship surface flashed with light, like a reflective mirror, and then disappeared on the spot with a hum. The next moment, a ripple suddenly flashed in the airspace in front of the blue hole, and with a bang, the silver spaceship had emerged. After approaching, a clear picture of the blue hole has emerged. The entire blue hole is now more than 30 meters high and wide. Ordinary medium-sized spaceships can pass through, but giant spaceships still cannot pass through. This requires the blue hole to continue to expand. Looking at the blue hole in front of him, Li Ming snorted coldly, and then clicked on the operating table. The attack device was immediately activated. A cylindrical device slowly rose on the top of the circular spaceship, which was a high-energy attack weapon. As soon as the weapon was activated, the oval-shaped spaceship not far away suddenly approached. At the same time, a dark light was emitted in front of the oval-shaped spaceship. It was a high-tech weapon. Before Li Ming's spaceship could be launched, the black light flashed and hit the silver spaceship where Li Ming was. Fortunately, the spaceship was protected by an energy shield, and this attack did not cause any damage. At this time, Li Ming's spaceship also emitted a white laser with a whoosh, and the beam directly hit the expanding blue hole. Boom. A violent vibration sound spread out from the vacuum. The laser energy quickly spread in the blue light curtain, and the blue light curtain appeared like a mirror with more than a dozen cracks and kept shaking. Brendan, who was in the oval spaceship, suddenly opened his eyes and said in surprise, "This attack power is not a low-level civilization, but a high-level civilization." As he spoke, a ferocious face appeared again, and then he aimed at the operating water. The surface of the operating water rippled, and the spaceship where Li Ming was directly locked. At this time, Li Ming also looked at the operating table with a puzzled look, whispering, "It's not damaged." Although the blue hole was attacked by Li Ming's silver spaceship, it only cracked and did not disappear. Although it stopped expanding, the crack was also repaired little by little. Seeing this, Li Ming glanced at the operating table again. His spaceship had been locked by the oval spaceship, but Li Ming didn't care. He pointed directly at the operating table, intending to launch a second attack. The barrel on the top of the circular spaceship flashed again, and the second shell was ready, but just when it was about to be launched, the black oval spaceship suddenly approached. This black oval spaceship did not take the previous attack, but directly hit Li Ming's spaceship. This kind of collision is different from the collision we know. The general collision will cause damage and fragmentation, or even collapse. But the oval-shaped spaceship was different. Its surface was originally liquid black tissue. Once it touched Li Ming's spaceship, the black liquid substance immediately spread along the surface of Li Ming's spaceship, as if Li Ming's spaceship was about to be swallowed by a drop of ink. The collision and the invasion of black liquid did not stop the launch of Li Ming's spaceship's energy shells. There was only a bang and a dull sound. The high-energy laser spread again on the surface of the blue hole. Although it was attacked again, the blue hole still did not disappear, but the original cracks suddenly increased and increased a lot. In this state, the blue hole could not be activated in a short time. It would take a long time to repair those cracks. However, at this time, Li Ming's spaceship was completely wrapped by the black oval spaceship. Once it was wrapped by the other party, Li Ming's spaceship seemed to be blinded, and the direction was completely lost. Various beeping sounds continued on the operating table. Li Ming did not know what happened to the spaceship, but he could also think that the oval spaceship was playing tricks. At that moment, he pointed his right hand at the operating table, and a beam of green light was shot into it. Now Li Ming had to use his consciousness to completely control the spaceship. From the outside, the oval spaceship has become an irregular shape because it swallowed Li Ming's circular spaceship, which caused its shape to become very strange. After Li Ming used his consciousness to control the spaceship, his face changed slightly. Now, except for the kinetic energy, all other functions of the spaceship have disappeared. The black substance is extremely strange, making Li Ming's spaceship unable to transmit, unable to contact the outside world, and unable to move independently. But Li Ming can sense the direction of the spaceship's movement. Simply put, Li Ming's spaceship is now moving to one side under the traction of the opponent. In this case, then I will do the opposite. With this, Li Ming used his consciousness to control the spaceship, to start the kinetic energy, and began to move. Although Li Ming could not see it at this time, the movement was regular. If he sensed that the opponent was moving to the right, then Li Ming would drive the spaceship to the left. If the opponent was moving to the left, then Li Ming would go to the right. In any case, Li Ming was going in the opposite direction. This wave of operations made Brendan frown, because Li Ming's spaceship moved in opposite directions, just like two things in a sack pulling in opposite directions. That kind of powerful force is very unfavorable to the control of each other. Looking at this scene from the operating water, Brendan's face changed slightly, and he whispered, "Are you trying to break free in this way?" Humph. Brendan immediately snorted coldly, his eyes showing a fierce look. As Brendan said, if it is really pulled forcefully like this, Li Ming's spaceship is very likely to break free. Once it breaks free, the blue hole will be in danger. The reason why the aliens set up the blue hole here is because this is a low-level civilization area and will not be threatened too much, but they did not expect Li Ming, a high-level civilization, to suddenly come. Although the spaceships of both sides are different in nature, they both belong to high-level civilizations, and basically no one can do anything to each other. Brendan's choice to use the method of swallowing is more reasonable. Chapter 357 Return to Earth. The two entangled spaceships were like a headless fly, flying around in the universe, sometimes left, sometimes right, sometimes up, sometimes down. At first, Li Ming decided his own flight direction, based on the other party's flight direction, and tried to keep it opposite to the other party as much as possible, but not long after, the other party's spaceship began to fly in the rhythm of Li Ming. Which direction Li Ming went, the other party followed in that direction. This made Li Ming a little confused. Standing in front of the operating table, he frowned and thought to himself, what does this guy mean? Li Ming didn't know the situation outside, so he naturally didn't understand the reason. Brendan's idea at this time was very simple. He smiled coldly and whispered, as long as we trap the other party like this, it will be enough to create time for the blue hole to repair. But after thinking about it, Li Ming had already changed his strategy. After a slight cold snort, he suddenly narrowed his eyes and changed his plan for the operation of the spaceship. Li Ming no longer ran around like a headless fly. After locking a direction, he began to fly in a straight line. Even if he hit a meteorite, a planet or even a blue hole, it would be feasible. It was not a solution to always be controlled by the other party like this. With this idea, Li Ming's spaceship suddenly accelerated, locked direction, and flew straight out. Faced with Li Ming's sudden acceleration, Brendan didn't seem to care and still followed him closely. After all, the universe is boundless, and it is not easy for Li Ming to hit something, even if he wants to, but the direction that Li Ming locked happened to be aimed at a planet, the Earth. At first Brendan didn't care, but as he got closer and closer to the Earth, Brendan began to panic, staring at the control water with his eyes, whispering, can this guy see it? Impossible. Brendan immediately denied himself and quietly looked at the control water, hoping that Li Ming could change direction. But the facts are often the opposite of expectations. Li Ming was like a determined man, and the spaceship went straight, with no intention of turning. Seeing that he was getting closer and closer to the Earth, Brendan couldn't help but say angrily, this idiot. Don't you want to die? Seeing that Li Ming would not turn back until he hit the south wall, Brendan no longer hesitated and immediately changed the flight direction of the spaceship, intending to pull Li Ming away. Li Ming could not see anything, so he could only continue to fly straight. However, he suddenly became exhausted while flying, which made Li Ming frown and whisper, this guy's no longer flying with me. As he spoke, Li Ming smiled contemptuously and said again, the more this happens, the more it shows that my direction is right. Li Ming snorted and continued to accelerate without any intention of changing direction. Brendan had an ashing expression on his face. While pulling in the opposite direction, he said fiercely, this guy is a lunatic. The two spacecraft pulled with all their strength, which naturally helped Li Ming to break away from the black matter. Brendan knew this very well, but Brendan still wanted to try to pull Li Ming out, to ensure absolute control over him. However, the two spacecraft had already entered the Earth's atmosphere at this moment. This was no longer a matter of pulling. Under the influence of the Earth's gravity, the speed of the spacecraft suddenly increased inexplicably, not to mention that Li Ming was originally flying at full speed. Li Ming, who was in the main cabin, watched the speed of the spacecraft gradually recover. He showed a puzzled expression on his face again. He took a deep breath and whispered, has this guy given up? Brendan looked at the control water with trembling eyes at this moment, and couldn't say a word. From the perspective of the Earth, the two spacecrafts were already blazing, after rubbing against the atmosphere, and their original appearance had disappeared, as if a fireball fell from the sky. It was not an exaggeration to say that it was a meteor. Whoosh! The fire flashed by, and then boom. A loud noise shook the sky, and the fire blazed. A mountain area was instantly engulfed by the flames, and the trees in the mountains also burned. A forest fire began to spread around. The flames dyed the sky red, the thick smoke continued to roll, and all kinds of birds and animals fled to a safe place. The flames continued to spread, and continued to burn. The fire burned for a day and a night before it gradually went out. At this time, there were helicopters circling in the air, and a large number of armed rescuers began to rush into the forest. This was already a big news on the Earth. Various media began to report related events. In the center of the fire scene was a huge deep pit, with a black object and a round spaceship motionless in the pit. The spaceship of the advanced civilization was not damaged. Li Ming slowly sat up from the cabin and felt dizzy, but after only a few seconds, Li Ming's mind recovered and glanced at the operating table. He raised his hand and the light on the operating table flashed, and various information had emerged. Although the spaceship was damaged, it was all superficial friction and not serious. Li Ming asked the spaceship to complete the self-inspection through the operating table, and there was nothing unusual. After the self-inspection was completed, the operating table of the spaceship immediately displayed other information, including geographical location, coordinate information, etc. The black spaceship on the side was different. The surface was greatly damaged, and some places were even flashing arcs, as if it was about to explode. Li Ming looked at the operating table, smiled, and said, "I'm on Earth." As he spoke, Li Ming turned and walked out of the spaceship. The top of the silver spaceship flashed blue light, and Li Ming's figure emerged, but when he saw the traces left by the fire around him, his face changed slightly. The surroundings outside the spaceship pit were already full of traces of the wildfire, but after just a glance, Li Ming turned his gaze to the black spaceship in front of him. The black spaceship has now completely changed, and its most original appearance has also been completely revealed. The original black spaceship was oval in shape, nearly 30 meters long and more than 10 meters wide, but now only a sphere of more than 10 meters long and wide remains, and the rest has turned into liquid and flowed around. This is also the most primitive structure of this spaceship. Its core cabin is not large, but the outside is covered with a special black liquid object, and the flexibility of the object is completely controlled by the operating water in the main cabin. It is a special civilization technology. At this time, the spaceship only has a black sphere left, lying there alone and motionless. Li Ming narrowed his eyes slightly, and just as he was about to approach, the black sphere suddenly opened a hatch with a squeak, and then an alien slowly floated out from it. It was Brendan with a triangular head. As soon as he flew out of the spaceship, the hatch closed automatically. Brendan looked directly at Li Ming with angry eyes, gnashing his teeth, his eyes full of anger, as if he wanted to kill Li Ming. Li Ming looked at the other party with a calm attitude. This person was a first-level civilization, the same level of civilization as Li Ming. Among the same level, Li Ming did not put anyone in his eyes. After a light snort, he said, "Do you want to end it yourself? Or should I do it myself?" Brendan heard this. His face suddenly changed, raised his two arms, aimed at Li Ming, and grabbed the void, and at the same time, the tentacles under his arms flew quickly. Li Ming's figure flashed and disappeared directly on the spot, which made the opponent's attack completely miss. Brendan frowned and hurriedly looked around. But at this moment, a green shadow hand suddenly stretched out from behind him and grabbed the opponent's brain. Li Ming was standing not far behind him, with his right hand stretched out facing the opponent's head. He looked at the other person with contempt, smiled slightly, and quickly retracted his right hand. With this retracting movement, the blue shadow hand pulled the other person's energy soul out of his body. Then the energy body was absorbed by the blue hand bit by bit, just like a group of shadows merged into another group of shadows. After doing this, the blue light was also taken back into Li Ming's body. Looking at the body that fell to the ground, Li Ming also slowly landed, stretched out his right hand again, and two star bags floated out. After taking the star bags, Li Ming narrowed his eyes slightly and waved his left hand. Boom. With a thunderous sound, the body on the ground turned into ashes and disappeared. After doing this, Li Ming was ready to return to the spaceship, but his eyes turned and looked at Brendan's spaceship. It's not good for these products of advanced alien civilizations to stay on Earth. Saying this, Li Ming raised his hand and took out a star capsule. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelos. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 358 Encounter. Li Ming used the star capsule to collect the other party's spaceship and the flowing black liquid. All the objects irradiated by the star capsule were sucked into it. After making sure that nothing was left, Li Ming returned to his spaceship. As soon as Li Ming entered his spaceship, a helicopter flew over the area in the sky, but before the helicopter could find this place, the silver spaceship disappeared with a bang. Li Ming in the main cabin looked at the operating table in front of him, and the appearance of the entire Earth was displayed in front of him. Looking at it with both eyes, Li Ming couldn't help but touch his chin with his hand and whispered, "Since I'm back, I might as well take a look around." With this, Li Ming directly drove the spaceship to fly around. In order to avoid unnecessary trouble, Li Ming changed the color of the spaceship's appearance, like a piece of transparent glass, so that it would not be easily discovered. With the technology on this spaceship, it is enough to deal with any attack and defense on the Earth. Li Ming first came to the suburbs of a city. In the depths of Li Ming's memory, this is where he was born, but now it has changed dramatically. The original village has become a high-rise building. Things have changed, and people have changed. It is no longer what Li Ming remembered. He looked at the environment below through the operating console in the spaceship. He was calm and expressionless. Then the spaceship flashed and disappeared in the air. In the night sky, above T-City, Li Ming's silver spaceship was flying in the air like transparent glass. This city is also one of Li Ming's important memory points. The changes here are not very big. Li Ming stared blankly. The names of two people slowly emerged in his mind. One was Meng Lianai and the other was Hu Kei. Thinking of these two people, Li Ming smiled slightly. His eyes looked at the operating console in front of him again. The scene on the top of a building had emerged. Li Ming frowned and narrowed his eyes after just a rough look. There was a woman standing on the edge of the roof, looking like she was about to jump off the building. This building is nearly 50 stories high. Falling from it will definitely kill you. On the roof, a girl is wearing a skirt and barefoot. Her lifeless eyes seem to be full of despair for life. After a few seconds, her eyes suddenly closed, her body leaned forward, and she fell straight to the bottom of the building. But at this moment, a force suddenly lifted the girl up, and her rapidly falling body immediately became floating. Her long black hair fluttered in the wind, and the sound of the wind filled her ears, as if she was flying in the air. At this time, the girl immediately opened her eyes and looked around. She not only did not fall, but floated upwards. Beside the girl, a figure also floated with it. It was Li Ming. Li Ming looked at the other person gently and said, "Life is so beautiful, why do you give up so easily?" The girl was shocked and couldn't believe what she saw. Her big watery eyes kept looking at Li Ming. The girl's cute face also made Li Ming feel a little familiar, as if he had seen it before in the depths of his memory. The two looked at each other like this, and after a few seconds they returned to the roof. At this time, the girl seemed to feel like she was dreaming. She couldn't believe what she saw. She looked around for a while, and then looked at Li Ming again, looking at a loss. Li Ming looked at the other person from feet to face. The girl's bare white feet stepped on the rooftop. Her skirt fluttered in the wind. Her cute face, her blinking eyes. She looked very much like the person Li Ming knew. Hehe. Li Ming laughed softly and took out a nebula pill with his right hand. "It's fate that we met, so I'll give this to you as a gift," Li Ming said as he handed the pill over. The girl stared at the pill in a daze, then looked at Li Ming's smiling face, hesitated for a moment, and then stretched out her hand to take the pill. Watching the other party take the pill, Li Ming smiled again. At this time, a blue beam of light suddenly shone on Li Ming's body in the sky, and Li Ming's body slowly floated and drifted into the air along the blue light. Looking at Li Ming's figure rising higher and higher, the girl clenched the pill in her hand, but her expression suddenly changed, as if she suddenly remembered something, looked up at Li Ming who was about to disappear, and shouted loudly, "You, what's your name?" The voice echoed in the night sky, and Li Ming's figure completely disappeared in the air. Only the lonely shadow of the girl was left on the roof in a daze. In the outer space of the Earth, a silver spaceship flew away quickly, and after a few flashes, it disappeared in the dark starry universe. At this time, Li Ming still had something very important to do, which was to destroy the blue hole. After locking the target position, Li Ming's spaceship returned to the position of the blue hole after a while of flying. At this time, the blue hole had not been fully restored, and the cracks still existed. Although part of it was repaired, it would still take a long time to completely repair it. Li Ming looked at it coldly, stretched out his hand, and tapped on the operating table. At this time, the huge barrel on the top of the spaceship reappeared, and the muzzle of the barrel flashed, and a beam of aurora was shot out with a whoosh. Bang! A crisp sound was heard, and the blue hole shattered like a mirror. The debris floated in the vacuum of the universe, and gradually turned into starlight and disappeared. After doing this, Li Ming smiled with satisfaction. During this trip to the outer system, Li Ming completed all his tasks and goals. He not only destroyed the blue hole, but also witnessed the Earth again. Now Li Ming can return to the headquarters of the Huai Alliance. However, Li Ming did not plan to do so. Instead, he frowned and thought about something, and whispered, "Brendan." As he spoke, Li Ming's mind had begun to read the information in Brendan's mind. First of all, Brendan's identity, Pegasus Galaxy, Legia star system, Lexing people. The main role of the Pegasus Galaxy is to control the low-level civilization areas of the outer system, so the civilization combat power of the galaxy is divided into two parts, 2/3 of which are allocated to the outer system of the Milky Way, and 1/3 cooperate with the large and small Magellanic galaxies to attack the central system of the Milky Way. Brendan's task is to deploy wormholes to control various low-level civilization galaxies. However, Brendan has died in Li Ming's hands, and the safety of multiple nearby galaxies is basically unimpeded. This information is not very important to Li Ming. The main thing Li Ming needs to know is the thing called wormhole. In addition, there is another very important information in Brendan's mind, that is, about the Central System War. According to the plan formulated by the Pegasus Galaxy headquarters, after completing the task of occupying the outer system, Brendan will hand it over to the control of the low-level civilization that will come in from the blue hole, and Brendan, as a high-level civilization, will return to the central system. Brendan, who returns to the central system, will search for a source stars in the controlled starfields with some personnel from the large and small Magellanic systems to plunder resources. Seeing this, Li Ming already understood the intention. Simply put, after the central system area is controlled, a separate team will be formed to plunder all planets with resources, and Brendan is one of the members. This is exactly what Li Ming is excited about. A slight smile appeared at the corner of his mouth, and he whispered, "Since it is plundering resources, I have to go and see what's going on, and by the way, try the Magic Shadow Incarnation in the Inheritance Starbook." Magic Shadow Incarnation is one of the abilities in the Inheritance Starbook. This ability has the same effect as the Camouflage Potion, but it saves the sampling process. You only need to control the energy according to the method of cultivation to become what you want. Li Ming already knew Brendan's appearance. This time, Li Ming wanted to join their plunder, so it was naturally very important to transform into Brendan. With this plan, Li Ming operated the coordinates on the spaceship and prepared to leave here and return to the central system. At this time, the central system of the Milky Way was no longer peaceful. A large number of blue holes began to emerge in various starfields, and at the same time, some small spaceships of the advanced team were constantly flying out of the blue holes. All the blue holes looked exactly the same, like blue flames spreading and burning. If you look at it from a flat perspective, it's like the grass on the grassland is ignited. The flames spread and burn around from a central point, and the area burned by the flames is the blue hole. The formation and spread of blue holes are very slow. When they reach a length and width of several dozen meters, small spaceships will fly out of them. These spaceships are mainly to protect the blue holes. Chapter 359. The war begins. The number and location of blue holes are almost random in any corner, and even appear on some planets. It is impossible to completely destroy all blue holes, but destroying as many blue holes as possible is very beneficial to the civilization of the Milky Way. However, there is a starfield where the blue hole has expanded to tens of kilometers in length and width. The formation of such a huge blue hole has also caused a large number of alien spaceships to fly out of it. The spaceship came out of the blue hole, just like something came out of a mirror, weird and wonderful, and huge spaceships immediately filled the nearby airspace. And this place immediately became the focus, especially for the Huai Alliance. On the star Isaiah, Yaba and Zenil were alone in a room. Their eyes were looking at the starry sky situation map, and the location of the largest blue hole was the focus of their attention. Is it where the inner people are responsible? Yaba stared with his eyes, a little unhappy. Zenil nodded slightly, and then said, because the inner people are not strong enough, I have sent the most advanced weapons there before the blue hole was formed. Logically speaking, there shouldn't be a blue hole in this place that has expanded to this extent. Yabaro just stared at it intently, and after hesitating for a while, he said, since they appear here, they will definitely occupy Inner first, and then attack other star systems in the alliance. At this point, Yabaro's expression suddenly became serious, and he said, send people to support Inner immediately. Yes. Zenil replied and stepped back. At this moment, dozens of giant spaceships have gathered at the huge blue hole near Inner. These spaceships are of different shapes and are not uniform, but each spaceship has some special marks on it. This mark looks like M in a conspicuous position on the surface of the spaceship. Because each spaceship has this mark, even the spaceships with different appearances look particularly uniform at this time. Dozens of spaceships surrounded the giant blue hole, forming a space base with the blue hole as the center. These spaceships were similar in size, thousands of meters long and hundreds of meters wide, and the huge scale was amazing. At this time, the blue hole suddenly shone with light, and a supergiant spaceship was slowly flying out. This spaceship was even bigger, in the shape of a round cake, like a millstone. Only half of its size exposed from the blue hole was larger than the surrounding spaceships as a whole. Because of its huge size, the time it took for this spaceship to come out of the blue hole was also very slow, but every move was shocking. In the area where the spaceship had already come out, a tall alien was standing in front of the transparent window at the top of the spaceship, looking at the starry sky from afar, with a strange smile in his serious expression. The alien's head was like a sheep's head, and there were two curved horns on his head. The difference was that the two horns grew to the left and right, like a hair ornament on the top of the head. He was wearing black and white armor, holding a scepter in his left hand, and the top of the scepter was a yellow bead the size of a football, which emitted a faint light. This person is none other than the king of Magellanic system, Simantl. At the same time, in another distant airspace, a giant spaceship has flown out of the blue hole. This spaceship is also a supergiant spaceship, huge, shaped like a fishbone, and the hull is silver white. From a distance, it looks like a giant fishbone flying in the universe. At the fish head of the spaceship, a dog-headed alien is staring at a space screen. This alien is covered with silver armor, even half of his face is covered by the armor, and his upright ears are exposed outside the armor. A pair of eyes swept across the space screen, revealing a slight smile, and said, Simantl, it's time to start. This person is none other than the small Magellanic system commander, Sterius. At this time, Li Ming is still on his way to the central system, but Li Ming does not know that the war in the central system has already begun. With Li Ming's current identity, he can enter the central system through multiple secret critical points. These teleportation points hidden in the planetary belt are secrets in the advanced civilization of the central system, and only the top leaders know about them. The secret critical points are prepared for personnel who are on special missions. Ordinary people have no way of knowing them. With these critical points, Li Ming can choose the most suitable position to enter the central system. With this in mind, Li Ming's spaceship has reached the edge of the planetary belt. Various meteorite planets are flowing and swimming in space like a river. Li Ming looked at these meteorites and did not enter directly. His eyes turned slightly. He was already thinking about something. He stretched out his right hand and tapped lightly on the operating table. These meteorite streams can be clearly seen on the operating table. Li Ming looked at them with his eyes and touched his chin. He thought to himself, it's still too dangerous to enter the central system like this. His eyes turned slightly, and a smile appeared at the corner of Li Ming's mouth. He flipped his right hand lightly and took out a metal ball. A moment later, a blue light suddenly flashed next to Li Ming's silver spaceship, and a black spherical spaceship appeared. It was the Brendan spaceship that was killed by Li Ming. The black round sphere floated in the air, and the black liquid was just below the sphere, as if a black ball was on a pool of water. In the vacuum of the universe, Li Ming flew out of the silver spaceship wearing armor. The armor on Li Ming's body was formed by the metal capsule just now. With this armor, Li Ming can control his body more freely in the vacuum. He took out the star capsule and put his round spaceship into it, then turned around and ran straight to the black spherical spaceship. He gently touched the surface of the black sphere with his palm. The palm of his palm flashed with green light, as if his palm would glow. The green light spread out with his palm as the center, flowing on the surface of the spherical spaceship, just like water poured on the surface of the sphere, constantly flowing along the sphere. After a few seconds, the surface of the sphere turned into a blue light phantom, and Li Ming smiled slightly and entered it. The technology of this spaceship is not scientific and technological civilization, but biological civilization. The spaceship equipment manufactured by advanced civilization technology is presented in completely different ways because of the different civilization background. Li Ming was already standing in the main cabin, his consciousness completely dispersed. His eyes turned and looked at the operating water floating in the air. His expression was indifferent. He raised his hand and pointed at the operating water, and the transparent operating water slowly floated over. Staring at this thing, Li Ming smiled slightly and showed satisfaction. Under Li Ming's operation, the black liquid under the spherical spaceship quickly squirmed and soon wrapped the entire spaceship. Under this black liquid, the original appearance of the spherical spaceship had completely disappeared, replaced by an elliptical spaceship. Li Ming can control the appearance of this spaceship at will. The system defaults to an elliptical shape, so Li Ming did not change it. He clicked his right hand again and entered the transmission coordinates. The surface of the liquid spaceship flashed and disappeared on the spot with a bang. Li Ming in the main cabin looked at the various facilities in the spaceship curiously. This biological civilization from outside the Milky Way must be different, but just as Li Ming was looking around, the operating water suddenly shook and made a buzzing sound. Li Ming's head turned when he heard the voice. His eyes moved quickly, and he immediately thought of something. Suddenly, a blue light flashed on the surface of his body, and his original human appearance immediately changed into the appearance of Brendan's triangular head. At this time, Li Ming adjusted the operation a little more, and saw a blurry alien figure appear inside. He couldn't see his face clearly, only an outline. As soon as he appeared, he said angrily, "Brendan, what are you doing? I have contacted you so many times, why don't you answer?" Li Ming quickly leaned over and lowered his head. After hesitating for a while, he said, "Because there were some small accidents here, so." "Okay. Don't explain it first. There is an important task that needs to be assigned to you right now." The blurry figure immediately interrupted Li Ming's words and said, "So, important mission?" Li Ming said to himself, but his expression was still serious. He said, "Master Cottrell, please give me your orders. I will do my best." The vague figure named Cottrell nodded slightly and said, "Our Pegasus is responsible for logistics this time. Now that the war has broken out, many star systems have been controlled in the front. Now some logistics supplier resources are on the way to those star systems. I order you to join the guard team to ensure the supply of resources. I will send you the location coordinates. This matter is very important and there can be no mistakes," Cottrell said seriously. Li Ming nodded vigorously and replied, "I understand." As soon as the voice fell, the communication was immediately closed, and the figure operating in the water disappeared. Chapter 360 Guard, Logistics Resource Guards. Li Ming whispered silently. War logistics resources include a wide range of elixirs, energy, equipment, spacecraft, weapons, etc. Li Ming did not know what kind of resources were mentioned here, but this was very different from Li Ming's original intention. The previous mission was to plunder resources, but now it has been changed to logistics resource guards, which made Li Ming shake his head secretly. It seems that Brendan's low position is really not very good. Li Ming sighed and said to himself, Li Ming has mastered all the information about Brendan. His status is indeed a bit low, otherwise he would not be sent to the outer system to deal with low-level civilizations. The powerful main force will naturally go directly to the middle system. The two tasks also fully confirmed this. Li Ming's eyes turned, and his eyes showed a thoughtful look, but soon he snorted with disdain. Whether it was plundering or guarding, Li Ming could only let it go and adapt to the situation. The Moi star system, Maoan star. This star system is exactly where Li Ming received the order to go. Li Ming was not unfamiliar with this galaxy. It was one of the 11 member galaxies of the Hua Alliance. This galaxy was of medium strength and belonged to the Power civilization. This galaxy was relatively remote, located at the edge of the Alliance starfield. Li Ming could understand that it was occupied by extragalactic enemies. After all, it was far away from the central area of the Alliance, relatively isolated, and support arrived slowly, so it was normal for it to be occupied. Li Ming looked at the operating water floating in the air, which was automatically transmitted to this galaxy. At this moment, two figures were standing on the top of a mountain on Maoyan Star. This mountain was tall and majestic, and it was the only mountain nearby. Not far from the foot of the mountain, a large number of soldiers were walking back and forth. Some were carrying things, and some were busy on the tops of some buildings. This building area was full of vertical buildings, like pencils. Sometimes there were also many aircraft shuttling back and forth between the buildings. The alien on the edge of the mountaintop was protected by armor and had a mask on his face, so his face could not be seen clearly. He was tall and looked down at the scene in front of him, saying, "When everything settles down, we will have control over the resources of the entire galaxy. Isn't it good to stay here?" Tanjing. At the end of his words, his eyes moved to the corners of his eyes, as if he was looking behind him. Behind this person was a woman in black, with a vest on her upper body and shorts on her lower body. Her snow-white long legs were exposed, and she was wearing black leather boots on her feet. Her short black hair fluttered in the wind, and she had a black cloth tied on her forehead, completely covering her forehead. The most important thing was that her appearance was exactly the same as that of a human. A pair of crystal-like eyes looked at the masked man in front of him. His brows tightened slightly, and he said coldly, "Cottrell, you know what I want." The masked alien in front heard this and snorted lightly. The sound was very low, as if it had not been made. The corners of his mouth raised slightly, revealing a strange smile, and said, "You are really persistent, but don't worry, after the war here is over, I will naturally give you what you want, but don't forget, I'm still your savior." Tanjing's expression did not change when he heard this, but his eyes closed slightly, and his focused eyes stared at the person in front of him. Cottrell then chuckled twice and said, "Okay, let's stop here for now. Maoyan Star is a resource-rich place. Basil will be responsible for all matters. You only need to take care of it. If there is any emergency, I will let Mosley notify you. You don't need to ask about other things. As for the elixir, I will also let Mosley provide it to you on time, because I need to leave Maoyan Star for a while." Tanjing said nothing, just looked at the other person quietly, but in his cold expression, he seemed to be a little disdainful of the matter in front of him. After a long period of transmission, Li Ming has officially entered the Maoyan Star system. After a few more transmissions, Li Ming can reach Maoyan Star. Looking at the operating table in front of him, Li Ming's expression was indifferent. He had already associated this logistical resource in his heart. Li Ming's goal was to advance. Whether it was Hungren or the materials for synthesizing Ringsu, they were extremely important to Li Ming. If this logistical resource had what Li Ming wanted, it would naturally be great. It was with this little thought that Li Ming decided to come here to see what was going on. With a wishful thinking in mind, the spaceship had already approached Maoyan Star. In space, the appearance of Maoyan Star and the scene of the nearby airspace came into view. Maoyan Star was earthy gray in color, with only mountains and hills. The detailed information about this planet was fully displayed on the operating water, and a large number of spaceships and space stations appeared near the space. And there were still spaceships flying to and from this planet, as if they were very busy. At this time, a message came from the operating water. Li Ming glanced at the message roughly, raised his hand casually, and did not care. The content of the message was to verify Li Ming's identity. Li Ming naturally replied as Brendan. Next, this spaceship will be fully controlled by the system on Maoyan Star, and Li Ming does not need to do anything. The data flow of the other party's operation began to automatically appear in the operating water, and the spaceship will be transmitted to a fixed place on Maoyan Star. Li Ming's eyes never left the control water. He saw the light spots flashing on it, and there was a buzzing vibration from time to time. It was the spaceship transmitting itself. After a while, the sound and vibration stopped automatically. At this time, the spaceship had parked in an open space next to a building area. This was the parking area for spaceships. In addition to the round spaceship driven by Li Ming, there were many other types of spaceships parked. As soon as Li Ming's spaceship landed, there was a person waiting below. The blue light flashed, and Li Ming's figure slowly landed from it. The first thing he saw was the tall buildings in the distance, each of which stood upright on the ground like a pencil. There were also many aircraft flying back and forth in the sky. There was only one 7th level soldier underground in front of him. Li Ming narrowed his eyes slightly and just took a rough look, and the information in the other part his brain was detected. This 7th level soldier was here to greet Li Ming, and there was only one soldier. This made Li Ming feel a little unhappy. No matter what, Brendan was a 1st level civilization, belonging to the advanced civilization sequence. Why was he so disregarded? Although he was dissatisfied in his heart, Li Ming didn't care too much on his face. As soon as his feet landed on the ground, the soldier came forward and said, "Is this Lord Brendan?" Li Ming nodded slightly and said nothing. The soldier then said, "Station Master Basil has arranged a position for you. Please come this way." Li Ming still said nothing, looked at the other person coldly, and walked away directly. The soldier led the way for Li Ming as he walked, but he did not walk towards the construction area, but went to a remote place far away from the construction area. This was naturally a bit strange, but Li Ming still said nothing, just continued to walk, until he stopped at the bottom of a mountain. This mountain is tall and majestic, rising straight into the clouds. At the bottom, like tree roots, there are many small mountain ranges extending out. These small mountain ranges are more than 10 meters high and wide, and are not very eye-catching compared to the big mountain. The place where Li Ming stopped was a rock area of different sizes. These rocks seemed ordinary, but under Li Ming's keen eyes, he had seen some clues. These rocks contained a lot of vortex-shaped energy, which was used for transmission. The soldier came to one of the medium-sized rocks, raised his hand and lightly tapped it. A blue light flashed on it, and a portal appeared. "This is the place that Basil arranged for you." The soldier looked at Li Ming while speaking. Li Ming glanced at him and walked in. With a flash of light, Li Ming's figure came to an open space. It was more than 10 meters long and wide, surrounded by cave walls, as if in a cave. Facing Li Ming was a stone staircase going up. Looking up the staircase, there was a metal door at the top. Except for the metal door at the top of the staircase, there was nothing unusual in other places. Li Ming hesitated for a moment, and walked over quickly. He stepped on the staircase, until he came to the metal door. He raised his hand and lightly tapped it. The surface of the metal door flashed, and the whole door became transparent, and softened like water. Li Ming then walked in. When he entered, Li Ming's face sank. This was actually just a closed small room. The four walls of the room were 4 large screens. The screens showed some displayed items. It was the warehouse. Li Ming just understood what was going on. His gloomy face was filled with displeasure, and he even said, This is the security room. Chapter 361 Mysterious Box. 4 warehouses, 4 surveillance cameras, all under Li Ming's observation. Li Ming, a 1st level civilization, was actually assigned to be a security guard here. This made Li Ming even more angry. He was thinking about leaving here, but his eyes were fixed on the screens. The more he looked, the more strange it felt. As he looked, Li Ming came to the front of the screen step by step. There was a faint green light in his narrowed eyes. Li Ming had seen some clues about these screens. He opened his mouth slightly and whispered, "Could it be? This is a teleportation screen." Li Ming had a reason to say this. The teleportation screen is a product based on the teleportation gate developed by the intelligent civilization. Its most powerful function is to make the teleportation gate into a glass-like teleportation gate through some special materials. That is, you can watch through the teleportation gate, and you can also enter through the teleportation gate. It can be said to kill 2 birds with 1 stone. The manufacture of this device comes from the time and space tribe of the intelligent civilization, and it requires special materials to complete it. There was some doubt in his heart, but he was not completely sure. After thinking for a while, Li Ming's right hand was raised, and the palm of his hand flashed with green light, and a small green dragon had formed. The azure dragon was exactly the ability of Li Ming's wisdom eye, the flying dragon. With a wave of his right hand, the azure dragon flew out of his hand, and turned into a blue light, and entered one of the screens. Just as Li Ming guessed, this screen really had the ability to teleport. Li Ming was also very excited, showing a satisfied smile, and said to himself, if that's the case. As he spoke, the azure dragon had already teleported into the warehouse through the screen. This is an independent warehouse, which is not connected to the other 3 screens, and is in a completely closed state. There are rows of shelves everywhere, and each shelf is filled with star bags. As for what is in the star bags, Li Ming's azure dragon has begun to check. As the azure dragon checked one by one, Li Ming's original excitement gradually subsided, and he shook his head from time to time. These star bags are all ordinary soldiers' equipment, armor, or weapons, which are naturally useless to Li Ming. Seeing this, Li Ming couldn't help but look disappointed. Fortunately, there are 4 warehouses here. After Li Ming took back the azure dragon, he immediately started to enter the next warehouse to check. After a while, Li Ming's King Lang checked all 4 warehouses. In these 4 warehouses, there were indeed some logistical resources, but they were all supplies for soldiers. Those soldiers were only of the 7th level civilization, so the things they used were naturally useless to Li Ming. After reading all of them, Li Ming's face returned to his previous anger. He thought he could still get some benefits, but he didn't expect that in the end it was still empty. Just when Li Ming was frustrated, his eyes suddenly widened a little, and he raised his head suddenly, looking closely at the location of the last warehouse. The King Lang was still flying inside, but it was no longer wandering among the star bags, but came to the wall at the edge of the warehouse. This breath is. Li Ming's face showed surprise. His eyes narrowed slightly, and the King Lang flashed into the wall. Deep in the wall was a separate storage box. This square storage box was only 1 foot long and wide, and a barrier was set on the surface of the box, so even the King Lang could not enter it. But the King Lang could feel the breath on the surface of the box, which was what attracted Li Ming. Li Ming stared at the screen, thinking, and said to himself, what will be in that box? Thinking in his mind, Li Ming was already very curious, and if he wanted to know what was in the box, he had to go in person. Thinking in his mind, Li Ming snorted and flew up. With a flash of light, Li Ming's figure passed through the screen and came to the ground inside the warehouse, just like magic. The technology of this advanced intelligent civilization was indeed amazing. After landing on the ground, Li Ming ran straight to the wall of the warehouse, but just as Li Ming was about to get close to the wall, another wall in the distance behind him suddenly burst. 2 figures walked in. Li Ming hurriedly stopped and turned to look. The people who came were 2 advanced aliens. The leader was a 1.1 civilization, and behind him was a 1st level civilization. When they saw Li Ming, the 2 were also surprised. The leader first looked at Li Ming carefully, then turned his head to look at the teleportation mirror on the top of the warehouse, and said, "Are you the new Brendan?" Li Ming nodded repeatedly, bowed and saluted, not daring to say more. But through his sharp eyes, Li Ming knew that the person who came was the station master, Basil. Basil looked unhappy at the moment, and after a cold snort, he said, "Brendan, I asked you to guard the warehouse, but I didn't let you come and go at will. Do you know how much energy the teleportation mirror consumes when used once?" Li Ming hurriedly leaned over again and said nothing. Basil glanced at Li Ming with contempt and continued, "Brendan, you are the only 1st level civilization in the Legia galaxy. Cottrell sent you here to guard the warehouse, to take care of your galaxy, fearing that you would accidentally lose your life while participating in other tasks, and then the Legia galaxy would have nothing to do but perish. But you are so ungrateful. I, Basil, don't care about that. After all, 1 less civilization in a galaxy means saving more resources," Basil said coldly. Although Li Ming knew Brendan's identity, he was not clear about the internal struggle of their Pegasus galaxy. Now that Basil said this, Li Ming naturally understood that this kind of struggle between galaxies existed even in the Hua Alliance, so it was not surprising. Basil looked at Li Ming, and then looked at the alien of the 1st level civilization beside him. He smiled coldly and said, originally, this escort mission was to be completed by Colby, but now I have changed my mind. You will complete it, and Colby will take your place to guard the warehouse. Basil said this, and walked past Li Ming quickly. Li Ming raised his head slightly at this time, and his eyes kept looking at the two of them. Li Ming finally discovered the secret in the wall, but he didn't expect to be transferred soon. Naturally, he was dissatisfied, but after a closer look, Li Ming's expression immediately eased. From Basil's mind, Li Ming found some interesting things. Basil had come to the wall at this time. He raised his hand and pointed at the wall. A blue light shot out from his fingertips. The blue light moved back and forth between the gaps between the bricks on the wall, like a circuit board. The light flowed and flashed, and the original wall suddenly disappeared. Then a square metal box appeared. This metal box was the one Li Ming had seen before. It was only 1 foot long, wide and high. The appearance was silver black, and there were strange runes carved on the surface of the box. Basil raised his hand and took the box in his hand. Then he turned around, looked at Li Ming coldly, and said, "Come with me." Li Ming still said nothing, and followed the other party. The man named Colby stayed. There was a portal on the wall of another part of the warehouse. Li Ming followed Basil, and passed through the portal to a house. The spacious room was the top floor of the high-rise building. From here, you can see all the construction areas and the mountain where you just teleported. Basil came to the meteorite table, and sat down slowly. He also put the box in his hand on the meteorite table. He glanced at Li Ming and said, "This thing is to be sent to an star. Now I will give this task to you. If you can complete the task and return smoothly, then you will have done a great job, but if you mess up, humph, then there is only one way to go." Basil said coldly. Li Ming hurriedly bowed and saluted, and replied, "I will definitely complete this task excellently." The voice was not loud, but it was meaningful, which made people feel a little weird after hearing it, but Basil didn't care. He waved his hand, and threw the box over. Li Ming raised his hand to take it, and looked at the box with his eyes. His expression did not change, but he was ecstatic in his heart. Li Ming was worried about whether he would have any trouble taking the box from the warehouse. Unexpectedly, the box was delivered to him now. Things changed too quickly, and even Li Ming himself was surprised and pleasantly surprised. Chapter 362, In a Planet. Basil provided Li Ming with the route and coordinates, and Li Ming took the mysterious box and drove his spherical black spaceship away from Maoyan Star. As soon as the spaceship left Maoyan Star, Li Ming in the main cabin began to study the mysterious box. The transmission system has been automatically transmitted according to the coordinates, and Li Ming does not need to worry. There is only Li Ming in the entire spaceship, so Li Ming can naturally study the box with complete confidence. A pair of wise eyes watched quietly, and there was a constant stream of light flashing on the surface of the metal box. What was even more strange was the characters on the surface of the box. Li Ming had never seen such characters before, and there was also a strange breath overflowing from these characters. The reason why Li Ming was able to find this box was because King Lang discovered this breath on this box. Feeling the breath, looking at the box with both eyes, Li Ming's right hand has gently reached out, and the palm came to the top of the box, with the palm facing the box, and his eyes narrowed slightly. A little bit of phantom emerged from Li Ming's hand, like blue bubbles. After a while of wriggling, a large number of blue phantoms fell from Li Ming's palm, like a bunch of sticky liquid. The appearance of the blue light is a manifestation of Li Ming's strong mental power. The more mental power is used, the state of the blue light will change. The sticky blue phantom at this moment is because of this. The blue phantom slowly fell on the metal box, and then flowed along the surface of the box a little bit and gradually wrapped the whole box. The reason why Li Ming used such a strong mental power was entirely because the previous King Lan could not do anything to this box. The strong mental power was already in place, and the whole box was wrapped by this mental power. But despite this, Li Ming still frowned tightly. This barrier doesn't even have the slightest flaw. Li Ming couldn't help but take a deep breath, his face full of confusion, and he even said to himself, it shouldn't be. Li Ming had encountered many barriers before, but none of them could escape the wisdom eye under his mental power. But now that Li Ming is a high-level civilization, his mental power and wisdom I have greatly increased, and there is no reason why he can't crack this metal box. His puzzled eyes were full of worry, which Li Ming couldn't understand. He slowly retracted his right hand, and the green shadow disappeared. He touched his chin and thought. Since Li Ming had the wisdom there are only a few places that cannot be explored. One is a higher level civilization with energy far higher than Li Ming, and the other is the wisdom I owned by more. Apart from this, Li Ming's wisdom I can explore and crack through passive or active exploration. This barrier in front of him is really strange. Looking at the box quietly with a pair of eyes, Li Ming couldn't help but sit down to the side, holding his chin with his right hand, staring at the box with his eyes, thinking and pondering. After a long while, Li Ming shook his head and whispered, "No wonder Basil was so confident in handing the box to me. It turns out that this box is so powerful." With a long sigh, Li Ming's eyes moved away from the box, but a few seconds later, Li Ming suddenly turned his head and looked at the box with his eyes shining. A flash of thought flashed through his mind. "Although I can't open it, the person who received the box can always open it," Li Ming whispered again. As he said so, Li Ming nodded and smiled slightly. At the same time, his eyes turned again and looked at the position of the operating water. The spacecraft continued to transmit along the designated route. Looking at the route and the target, Li Ming's eyes kept blinking. The corners of his mouth twitched slightly, and he muttered to himself again, "Enna-star? Enna-star is exactly where the box is to be delivered, but this also brings a new problem. Enna-star is also one of the member galaxies of the Huai Alliance. Why did the extragalactic aliens send this mysterious box there?" Li Ming gently stroked his chin with his right hand, and his eyes rolled slightly in his eye sockets. This high probability means that Enna may have been occupied by extraterrestrial aliens, but Li Ming didn't care too much. No matter where the box was sent, it would be opened someday. Li Ming just had to wait quietly. With his eyes closed slightly, Li Ming began to think about other things. Since Li Ming learned about Larsen and Mayo, Li Ming has been deeply exploring Larsen's fragmented memories. Li Ming has mastered the synthesis method and materials of Ringsu, but he has never seen those materials. To unlock the secret of Ringsu, Li Ming can only rely on Larsen's memory. Larsen and Mayo synthesized 2 Ringsu. Mayo succeeded in advancing, and Larsen failed. If this puzzle cannot be solved, Li Ming would not dare to use it easily, even if he got the synthesis materials and synthesized Ringsu. Larsen's memory fragments are complicated to sort out, just like hundreds of photos that have been torn into pieces. Even if you occasionally piece together a photo, it is headless and tailless, and you don't know what it means. Li Ming has been exploring and sorting out these memories when he was on Isaiah. Now that he has free time, he will check them again. Time passed quickly, and before he knew it, Li Ming's spaceship had entered the galaxy where Enna was located, and the image of the galaxy was slowly presented in the operating water. The Enna galaxy was originally a weaker galaxy in the Alliance, just like the Tillmans in the Yuhuo galaxy, but with the arrival of Li Ming, the Tillmans successfully rose, and the Enna people entered decline. After trade, Millicent and Winslow were killed by Li Ming. The Enna-star had only one first-level civilization left, Ax. Enna in this state naturally could not resist the invasion of extraterrestrial aliens, but the location of the Enna galaxy was very critical in the Alliance. If this galaxy was occupied, the Alliance would be passive. Strategically, each alliance would definitely give priority to clearing the blue holes in its own starfield, and then jointly resist the blue holes outside the starfield. But a giant blue hole appeared in the key position of the Enna galaxy. As Li Ming's spaceship slowly approached Enna, the huge blue hole became more and more obvious. Li Ming looked at the operating water in front of him, and his expression could not help but be stunned. This blue hole is 100 kilometers long and wide. It may not be considered big for the universe and planets, but for giant spaceships, it is already an open door. Li Ming's spaceship slowed down, and his eyes were fixed on the operating water. The huge blue hole was full of spaceships and space stations of different sizes, like a beehive. The huge scale was something Li Ming had never seen before, like a space base with no end in sight, and spaceships shuttling back and forth. After watching for a while, Li Ming gently raised his right hand and pointed it at the operating water. Various information was displayed in the transparent operating water. Most of this information came from the space base near the blue hole. The content of the information was roughly to confirm Li Ming's identity and purpose. Li Ming also responded to this information and naturally told the other party about his mission purpose without any hesitation. According to the information Li Ming got from Basil, Li Ming was only responsible for transporting the box to Ennistar, but did not indicate who it was to be delivered to. After the space base near the blue hole got Li Ming's mission purpose, it immediately sent a connection request to Li Ming. Li Ming suddenly felt a little confused and didn't know what was going on. After a slight hesitation, Li Ming connected the line. The transparent operating water immediately flashed, and an alien appeared. The alien was wrapped in armor and had a mask on his face. As soon as he appeared, he said, "Are you sent by Basil?" Li Ming nodded slightly and replied, "Yes." The masked alien then said, "That thing needs to be handed over to Axe. I will send a team to escort you to Ennistar. I will give you detailed information about Axe in person." Li Ming paused after hearing this, hesitated for 2 seconds, and replied, "Yes." The masked alien then nodded and disconnected the line. Although the conversation was simple, it revealed a lot of information. Li Ming frowned slightly and whispered, "Axe, escort?" These two words obviously contain too much content, which is also very different from Li Ming's judgment before this. In this case, Li Ming must make a correct judgment and plan again. Chapter 363, Thrilling Landing. Axe, isn't he the only first-class civilization on Enna? Give the box to him? Could it be that this guy has some relationship with the aliens outside the solar system? Li Ming whispered to himself. Escorting means that Enna is still under the control of the Huai Alliance, or at least in the war stage, which must be very dangerous. What role does Axe play in it? Li Ming was thinking to himself, and his spaceship was gradually approaching the atmosphere of Enna. At the same time, more than a dozen small spaceships were gradually approaching Li Ming's spaceship. These spaceships were not big, similar to ordinary fighters, but they flew very fast. They just left the space base in the previous glance and came to the side of Li Ming's spaceship after a few flashes. At this time, Li Ming only needed to follow these small spaceships, and no other operations were required. Li Ming's circular spaceship, together with the small spaceships around it, formed a formation, aimed at Enna, and rushed straight into it. From space, Enna is a blue-gray planet with both seas and mountains. This planet is full of science fiction colors, and a large number of construction areas are high-rise buildings, but the high-rise buildings here are different from those Li Ming has seen before. Each building complex has its own unique characteristics. Looking down from the sky, it seems like a bush full of thorns, and the black buildings are like straight vines. Passing through the atmosphere, under the influence of the planet's gravity, the spaceship of Li Ming's team went straight to a mountain area far away from the construction area. Li Ming just followed the team's flight, and he didn't know why the landing point was chosen here. As the spaceship approached the ground little by little, the operating water in front of Li Ming suddenly changed, and a group of red dots gathered here densely. After a few seconds, Li Ming had seen the reason clearly. Those flying red dots were the defense forces on Ennistar. At the first glance, those light spots were still some distance away from Li Ming. The next moment, the sound of whoosh 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 was all over the spaceship. These defense forces actually launched an attack directly. The small spaceship that had been flying with Li Ming immediately turned around and flew towards the red dots on both sides, launching a counterattack. An air battle immediately began. The current location was exactly the back of Ennistar, which was the night part. This node was a good choice. It was also more concealed for Li Ming's black spaceship. In the sky, various lasers flashed between the spaceships. Hitting the target did not mean shooting it down, because each spaceship had its own energy shield. Only by consuming the shield first could the enemy's spaceship be truly destroyed. Li Ming ignored the battles and only operated the spaceship to the ground. However, due to the absolute suppression in numbers, many spaceships also locked Li Ming. The lasers hit Li Ming's spaceship one after another. However, in front of the energy shield, the lasers turned into circles of ripples and disappeared as soon as they touched the surface of the spaceship. The light beams flashed quickly in the night sky, and the fierce battle continued. The black spaceship driven by Li Ming had already arrived above the mountains. Now Li Ming was eager to land because the black spaceship had suffered some damage when it was on Earth, and the long-term transmission also consumed a lot of energy. Faced with the crazy attacks of many spaceships, the shield on the surface of the black spaceship began to flash constantly and became shaky. Li Ming was in the main cabin with a serious expression. The operating water in front of him kept making a beeping sound and flashing red light. It was an alarm due to insufficient energy. Li Ming had already used his mental power to control the spacecraft. In addition to avoiding the enemy's attacks as much as possible, he also had to quickly find a more suitable landing point. In the operating water, the light spots flashed, and the topographic map of the mountains below appeared in the form of a phantom. Li Ming watched intently to find a hidden and suitable landing place. After a few seconds, a huge lake in the mountains came into view. Li Ming's eyes turned and immediately locked onto the lake, and the black spacecraft was like a meteor falling from the sky, heading straight for the lake. The enemies behind him were still attacking fiercely, but when they saw the huge lake on the ground, these spacecraft suddenly turned around, gave up the attack, and turned to fly away. This strange sign was also noticed by Li Ming, and he couldn't help frowning, but at this time the black spacecraft had come to the top of the lake, and was about to fall into it. Li Ming's eyes narrowed slightly, and his expression tightened, as if he had issued an order. The black spaceship, which was falling at a high speed, suddenly slowed down, as if it had stepped on the brakes. Since the enemy was no longer chasing, Li Ming did not have to make a hard landing. The spaceship slowed down and gradually stopped above the lake. As for the spaceships that had been chasing Li Ming, they did not go far away, but kept a certain distance from Li Ming's spaceship. To be precise, these spaceships kept a certain distance from the lake. Li Ming did not understand why, and was still thinking about the reason in his mind, but the next moment, an amazing scene happened. The water in the lake began to churn, as if something was about to jump out of the lake, and the spaceship's radar immediately noticed this. Li Ming looked at this strange phenomenon and his eyes widened a little. Obviously, this was not a natural phenomenon. His face tensed instantly. The spaceship was about to fly away as soon as it moved, but just as it was stimulated, there were several muffled bang 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 sounds, and more than a dozen tentacles emerged directly from the water. Li Ming's spaceship was tightly entangled by these tentacles before it flew far. After the thick tentacles fixed their target, they began to pull the entire spaceship into the water. Li Ming could feel the powerful force in the main cabin. Although the spaceship had already exerted its maximum energy to get rid of it, it seemed to be unable to resist these tentacles. The entire main cabin continued to emit the beep beep alarm sound, and the red light kept flashing. The spaceship had reached its limit, and it was only a matter of time before it was pulled into the water. Li Ming's eyes turned slightly and looked at the portal in the main cabin of the spaceship. It seems that I can only give up this spaceship. Whispering in his mouth, Li Ming turned his right hand, took out the star capsule, came to the metal box, put the object into the star capsule, then took a look at the operating water, and walked quickly towards the portal. Plop! A huge sound was heard, and the water splashed open, as if a huge stone fell into the lake. The waves gradually dispersed, and the tentacles in the spaceship slowly returned to the water, causing a vortex on the surface of the water, but it soon returned to calm. At this time, in the depths of the lake, a giant beast opened its mouth wide, and the tentacles were sending the entangled spaceship directly into its mouth. This scene was also observed by Li Ming's consciousness, which made Li Ming's face look ugly instantly. This giant beast was a huge monster, and Li Ming naturally did not want to provoke it easily. Watching the giant beast swallow the spaceship completely, Li Ming swam quickly in the water and ran away. At this moment, in the nearest building area far away from the mountains, Axe was looking at an operating table in a room. Opposite Axe stood a 9th rank officer. All enemy planes were shot down, and only one spaceship fell into Lake of Silence. The officer reported. Axe nodded slightly, and all of this was on the operating table in front of him. He looked at it quietly with his eyes, showing hesitation. After a moment, he said, "Sack, this matter, Idriwini may not know yet." The soldier named Thak nodded vigorously and replied, "Because it is a small-scale harassment, we have not informed them yet." Axe nodded and replied, "Since all the enemies have been eliminated, don't tell them about this." You take some ground troops to search near the lake to see if there are any missed enemies and items. If you find anything, notify me immediately. Yes. Thak replied, turned around and left quickly. After Thak left, Axe's eyes returned to the operating table and gently stretched out his right hand. In the palm of his right hand was a black bead. As soon as it was taken out, it flashed and shot out black silk threads. The lines intertwined with the blue light on the operating table and formed a screen. A vague figure had already appeared on the screen. This vague figure could not see the face clearly, only a rough outline. As soon as it appeared, it said, "Axe, I got what you wanted." Chapter 364, Escape from Silent Lake. Axe looked unhappy and said in a cold voice, "The spaceship that delivered the things crashed into the Silent Lake. How can I get that thing?" Huh. The blurred figure made a surprised sound. Axe also opened his eyes slightly and said, "Cottrell. No, I should call you Mayo, isn't it more intimate?" Upon hearing this voice, the blurred figure was suddenly startled and moved slightly. This subtle move was naturally seen by Axe, whose expression changed slightly and said, "I don't have much patience now. I have allowed the appearance of the blue hole and protected the secret of your identity. I think I have done enough. I need to see Rinxu as soon as possible, otherwise." The blurred figure became still, and after a few seconds of pause, he said, "You will get what you want. Isn't this the essence of our cooperation? I will investigate the matter of delivering the items. If an accident really happens, I will find another way to give it to you." Axe shook his head while listening and said impatiently, "It's not a way, it's a must. As long as I get my things, I guarantee that the spacecraft of the Large Magellanic Cloud can land safely on Inna, and I can also guarantee that your secret will not be known by anyone else." The blurred figure continued to remain silent and replied after a while, "I will reply to you as soon as possible." As soon as the voice fell, the connection was immediately disconnected. Axe's eyes were still looking at the operating table, with a smug look on his face. At this moment, Li Ming slowly walked out of the lake and came to the shore. He turned around and looked at the lake's surface that had returned to silence, and Li Ming walked deep into the land. There are many big trees on the edge of the lake, forming a jungle surrounding the lake. Li Ming has never seen the plants here. The thick trees are more than 10 meters high, straight and strong, like pillars. Under the trees is a gravel ground, and occasionally some vines and weeds can be seen. Under the dark night sky, Li Ming can't see it very clearly, even if he uses his wisdom eyes. But it is absolutely right to stay away from this lake now. At this time, 3 huge spaceships appeared in the sky not far from the woods. Each spaceship is 100 meters long and rectangular. There are lights flashing on these spaceships. The light swings back and forth towards the ground like a searchlight, as if searching for something. The spaceship did not approach Li Ming, but just stopped over the mountains in the distance. Li Ming narrowed his eyes and looked at the spaceships intently. After a moment, the bottom of the spaceship suddenly flashed with blue light, shooting down beams of light, and then small robots more than 4 meters high landed along the blue light. These robots are not complete robots, but are controlled by aliens inside, just like ordinary aliens wearing large armor. In addition to these robots, many aliens also landed from them. These aliens were also wearing armor and holding weapons. Looking at these, Li Ming paused slightly, his eyes squinting and moving left and right, but he only stayed there for a few seconds before walking over quickly. At this time, dozens of robots and hundreds of aliens had gathered on the ground directly below the spacecraft. One of the high-level aliens waved his arms and commanded, "You go over there, you go over here. Everyone act separately and report immediately if you find anything suspicious or someone." Yes. Many aliens dispersed in groups of 3 or 5. At this time, Li Ming also quickly moved closer to the giant spacecraft, because Li Ming needed to get some information from these aliens. Walking out of the jungle, there was a wavy terrain in front of him, like a sand dune, ups and downs, and at this time Li Ming could already see the lights on the ground not far away. Those lights were a small team approaching Li Ming. Looking from afar, Li Ming smiled and walked over quickly. The alien leader of this team was Thacker. He slowly approached the woods while looking around. There were 3 aliens and 2 robots in the team. Each member was looking around and waving the lights in their hands. Whoosh! A gust of wind whistled past my ears. The sound was not loud, but very clear. The important thing was that there was no wind now. Thacker suddenly stopped, and the robots standing on both sides of Thacker also stopped. "What's wrong, Captain Thacker?" The alien in one of the robots turned and looked at Thacker. Thacker did not reply, but turned around suddenly and looked behind him. At this time, the two aliens behind him had disappeared, leaving only one figure, which was Li Ming. The two robots also turned around, but before they could turn around completely, Li Ming raised his hand slightly. Bang! The two robots disappeared directly on the spot, and Thacker was the only one left in the team in an instant. At this time, Thacker looked at Li Ming again, and he was already trembling. His eyes were wide open in fear, and his mouth was trembling, but he couldn't make a sound. Li Ming stared at the other person with his eyes. At this time, the information in Thacker's brain quickly entered Li Ming's brain. From Thacker meeting Axe, the content of their conversation, to Thacker coming here on a spaceship, all the scenes seemed to be recounted again, and these scenes were absorbed by Li Ming in less than a second. After reading these contents, Li Ming raised his right hand gently, pointed at Thacker in front of him, and flicked it lightly, just like flicking an empty finger. Bang! Another muffled sound was heard, and Thacker's figure disappeared on the spot. At this time, Li Ming turned around and continued to walk towards the location of the spaceship. As he walked, Li Ming's body surface began to glow with blue light. As the blue light continued to flash, Li Ming's body twisted and changed, and Brendan's appearance became Thacker's appearance. This is the ability of Li Ming's magic shadow incarnation. After a moment, one of the three spaceships in the sky suddenly took off quickly, then turned around and headed straight for the construction area. This move made the soldiers who were still searching on the ground startled, and they didn't know the reason. The spaceship left the place quickly under their puzzled gazes. Flying across the night sky, the spaceship headed straight for the construction area. The one who controlled the spaceship was Li Ming. This kind of spaceship has a fixed berthing base. Li Ming was naturally well aware of this information, but Li Ming had no intention of following the routine at the moment. He drove the spaceship directly over the construction area. Li Ming lightly tapped on the control panel of the spaceship and determined the location of one of the buildings. Then a blue beam shot out from it, and Li Ming's figure followed the beam and went straight to the front of the building. Looking around, Li Ming flashed into it. Passing through a portal, Li Ming came to a closed room. At this time, Axe was sitting in front of the control panel in the room. When he sensed Li Ming's arrival, he immediately looked up. "Sec, why are you back so soon?" Axe looked at Li Ming with surprise. Li Ming narrowed his eyes and looked at him quietly. Then he raised his right hand and a metal box appeared in his hand. He looked at Axe and walked over quickly. "Pa." With a slight sound, Li Ming placed the metal box on the operating table and said, "I found this in the lake." Upon seeing the box, Axe was overjoyed, his face full of joy, and he quickly stretched out his hands to hold the box in front of him, looking at it as if he was looking at a treasure. "It's this thing, it's this thing," Axe said to himself excitedly, his eyes wide open, never leaving the box, and his hands kept touching the surface of the box, as if he couldn't let it go. Looking at the box like this, Axe excitedly picked up the box and turned it over in front of his eyes, as if he was looking for something. After checking the surface of the box several times, Axe said, "I found it." As he spoke, Axe's hand had already touched a certain alien character on the box. Just as he was about to operate something, his body suddenly stopped. The smile on his face faded slightly, and after looking at Li Ming, he said, "There is nothing for you to do here, Sack. You can leave first." Li Ming stood there motionless. While the other party was checking the box, Li Ming's keen eyes had already gained a lot of information in his mind, and at the same time he revealed a slight smile. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelos. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 365. Mayo is still alive. Li Ming did not move, and not only that, He also showed a strange smile, which made Axe frown, and his eyes looking at Li Ming also changed slightly, but just when Axe was about to say something else, Li Ming suddenly raised his right hand, aimed at him, and grabbed the air. Before Axe could react, his body became stiff and unable to move, and the two arms holding the metal box loosened and closed together, and the whole body showed a standing posture. Then, a series of golden lights appeared on the surface of Axe's body, and the golden light was like a ring on Axe's body. Axe could not move, his eyes were full of horror, and he quickly looked at his body, only to see that the golden light condensed and turned into golden chains. Axe didn't understand, and twisted his body back and forth, intending to use his own energy to break free from the golden light chains. But after trying a few times, Axe knew that this golden light was a powerful power that he could not resist. You are not Zack. Who are you? Axe said hesitantly. Li Ming naturally ignored him, walked up slowly, and sat down in front of the operating table. Axe's eyes were always looking at Li Ming, his face full of anger, but now he could only watch. Li Ming glanced at the metal box, then turned his eyes to Axe, smiled slightly, narrowed his eyes, and said, I was wondering how such a large blue hole appeared in the inner galaxy. It turns out there is a traitor like you. Axe was shocked. When he heard this, his mouth trembled slightly, and he said with some stammering, You, who are you? Li Ming sighed for a long time, and his eyes were also fixed on the other party. As more information in his brain was discovered by Li Ming's eyes, Li Ming's face changed slightly, and his brows frowned slightly. These contents naturally included the conversation between Axe and Cottrell. The most important thing was that in this conversation, Axe also mentioned a name, Mayo. Li Ming's expression suddenly tensed, and his body quickly stood up, staring at Axe without moving. Axe didn't understand what Li Ming meant, but being stared at by Li Ming's menacing eyes, he couldn't help but look worried, and the muscles on his face twitched slightly. At this time, Li Ming's eyes widened a little, his expression was extremely serious, his mouth slightly opened, and he said, Mayo is not dead. When Axe heard Li Ming say this, his face turned pale instantly, and he looked at Li Ming, as if he was looking at a scary monster, his mouth trembling, and he couldn't say a word for a long time. As soon as Li Ming finished speaking, his right hand suddenly stretched out, and the green shadow extended along with Li Ming's arm. The green shadow hand grabbed the other's head, and then Li Ming pulled it back with force. With a light hum, Axe's soul was directly drawn out, and then the shadow hand turned into a vortex, absorbing the soul into it bit by bit. Without the soul, Axe's body fell to the ground with a thump, unable to move anymore, and the golden light chain on his body gradually turned into starlight and dissipated. The energy body that devoured Axe's body with mental power, all the cognition and memory in his brain, were completely mastered by Li Ming, and all the important information was like a melting iceberg spreading in Li Ming's brain. At this time, Li Ming stood there blankly, his eyes widened a little, and he slowly said, So, it's like this. As he said this, Axe's past memories were playing in Li Ming's mind like a movie. Of course, Li Ming only extracted and watched some important content for himself. Mayo is not a silicon-based life. His first partner was Axe. They have always had close communication, until Mayo joined Larson's research and development team. This has changed. Because Mayo is a genius biological civilization, that is to say, this person does not need too much material consumption from ordinary synthetic aliens to advanced synthetic masters. This is an extremely rare talent. Li Ming knew the existence of this kind of alien when he came into contact with biological civilization, but they are one in a million, very few, just like Einstein in the human world. The communication between Mayo and Axe has never been interrupted until Mayo left the Milky Way. Mayo left the Milky Way after the Rinxu incident on Ruby Star. The disappearance of this person was a loss to Axe, but Axe knew that Mayo and Rinxu had an inseparable relationship. It was not until the eve of the Galactic War that Mayo took the initiative to contact Axe, hoping that he could cooperate with Blue Hole to allow the troops of the Large Magellanic Cloud to enter the Milky Way smoothly in exchange for a Rinxu. Axe had already agreed to Mayo when his own galaxy was facing extinction, which led to the current situation. All this information was replayed in Li Ming's mind in the form of pictures, which also made Li Ming re-recognize the character of Axe. In addition to the Enna troops led by Axe, there are also troops from Xena of the Great Yan system on Enna Star. After all, the location of the Enna galaxy is very critical, and the Huai Alliance cannot give up easily, so it sent troops to support it. Li Ming's eyes blinked slightly, and he began to think, and whispered, Axe actually betrayed the entire alliance for Inksu. This so-called alliance is really unreliable. As he spoke, Li Ming's eyes showed doubts, and he said to himself again, but, in this galaxy war, what is Mao's purpose? What role does he play? Li Ming muttered to himself, as if he was asking himself, but these questions would not be easily answered, but Mao was extremely important to Li Ming. These two questions were abandoned after just a flash in his mind. He hummed softly and whispered, no matter what his purpose is, as long as Mao is found, the secret of Rinksu will be solved, and, the whereabouts of Wukong of the 6th domain star should also be related to him. As he said this, Li Ming couldn't help but look at Axe's body on the ground, and then waved his left hand, and a golden electric light shot out. Bang! A muffled sound was heard, and Axe's body was instantly turned into ashes by the golden electric light like foam. After doing all this, Li Ming's eyes returned to the metal box on the meteorite table. He smiled slightly, and stretched out his right hand. Li Ming had already mastered the password to unlock the barrier on the box from Axe's memory. He pressed the characters on the box one by one with his right hand. Li Ming had never seen or recognized those strange characters, but he remembered their appearance. Every time he pressed a character, a red light flashed, just like pressing a digital password, and these characters were distributed on the four sides of the box. If you are not familiar with the mystery, you will definitely not be able to open it. As the last character was pressed, the entire metal box suddenly glowed brightly, the surface of the box gradually blurred and disappeared, and the items inside were immediately presented in front of Li Ming. Looking at this object, Li Ming's eyes widened a little. This object looks like a lotus. The flower part is red, and the bottom of the flower is green. The color is bright, just like a real flower, very tempting. According to the information Li Ming has, this object is Rinksu. Li Ming was smiling and excited. He stretched out his right hand gently, and Rinksu floated up and came to Li Ming's hand. He stared at it with his eyes, and the smile on his face could not fade for a long time. Finally got Rinksu. Li Ming whispered softly, but as he looked at it, Li Ming's smile cooled down again and again, and his brows wrinkled slightly. This Rinksu. How? Li Ming suddenly whispered again, and his eyes turned slightly in his eyes, as if he suddenly thought of something. In Li Ming's brain, some memories gradually emerged. These memories came from Larsen's brain. Larsen's memory was divided into two parts. One was relatively clear, and the other was fragmented memory, which needed Li Ming to reorganize. The clear memory was before Larsen advanced. That memory clearly showed the picture of Rinksu, which was exactly the same as the one in Li Ming's hand now. Li Ming also pieced together a picture of Rinksu from the blurred memory fragments, but that Rinksu was different from what Li Ming saw now. The flower of Rinksu is white with a green base. The things are the same, but the colors are different, which makes Li Ming confused. Chapter 366, Sneak Attack Plan. Simply put, when Larsen advanced, the Rinksu he used was exactly the same as the one Li Ming was holding in his hand now, with a red flower and a green bottom. It was because of this that Larsen failed to advance and became an unconscious giant. However, in Larsen's memory fragments, there was another Rinksu with a white flower and a green bottom, but that scene was very short, and Li Ming could not understand the difference and the reason. Looking at the Rinksu in his hand, Li Ming's expression became cautious, and he said to himself, Larsen used this Rinksu to advance to an unconscious giant, but what about the other Rinksu? Li Ming whispered, his eyes also looking at the object in his hand. After hesitating for a moment, Li Ming took a deep breath, gently clenched his right hand, and the red Rinksu was put into the star capsule by Li Ming. It seems, only after seeing Mao can I know what's going on. Li Ming muttered to himself, thinking in his mind. Mao's identity is Cottrell, and Cottrell is the supreme leader of the Pegasus Galaxy. It is not easy for Li Ming to meet this person, but fortunately Li Ming can still stay among his subordinates as Brendan. As long as he is still his subordinate, Li Ming will have a chance. Thinking of this in his mind, Li Ming has been pacing back and forth in the room. After thinking for a moment, he paused and whispered, "Then we can only return to Maoyan Star." As he spoke, Li Ming's firm eyes had made a decision, and his body turned and walked towards the portal. At this moment, the conference building of the Hua Alliance headquarters was welcoming two important guests. In the corridor leading to the conference room, two alien figures were walking quickly, and their heavy footsteps made a pa-pa-pa sound. These two people are Tweak and Biggs from the Heth Alliance. At the end of the corridor, go directly through the portal, and Yarborough and Xenia are waiting in the conference room. Tweak's eyes were fixed on Abel, and he sat down directly at the table. Biggs unconsciously looked around and sat down next to Tweak. The four people sat on opposite sides of the conference table, all with serious expressions and cold eyes. Abel was the first to speak, saying, "It's a great honor to invite you to." Tweak snorted and said, "Tell me about the plan to attack Maoyan Star." Abel smiled slightly and replied, "You are still the same, resolute and impatient." As he spoke, Abel looked at Xenia beside him. Xenia immediately understood, raised his hand, and pointed at the conference table, and suddenly the desktop flashed blue light, and a star map was displayed. This star map is just the tip of the iceberg of the Milky Way, but the planets in one of the galaxies have been marked. Looking at the marked planet, Xenia said, "This is Maoyan Star in the Mo star system. It is now controlled by the Pegasus galaxy. According to the information we have, this Maoyan Star is the logistics supply station of the three major galaxies. The current war is only in the early stages. A large amount of supply resources are being transported here continuously. Destroying this place is of great significance to us. So, this time our plan is to attack Maoyan Star. According to our experience in the last galaxy war, active attack will give us more opportunities. Blind defense will only put us in a passive position." Xenia continued. Tweak looked at the galaxy and turned his eyes to Xenia. After a cold snort, he said, "This is the area of your Hua Alliance. What does it have to do with our Huff Alliance?" Abel's expression changed when he heard this, and he said, "Tweak, this is a galaxy war, not a problem of one alliance and one galaxy. To put it another way, if our Hua Alliance really does not exist, can your Huff Alliance be preserved?" Abel spoke harshly, very dissatisfied. As soon as he finished speaking, Xenia continued, "Other alliances also strongly support this operation, and they have also provided a lot of resources. After all, this kind of operation cannot be carried out in a big way, and only two elites are needed. What our Commander Abel means is that our alliance and your alliance will jointly send one member to participate. Regardless of whether the matter succeeds or fails, the resources provided by other alliances can be equally divided between our two alliances." Xenia continued. As soon as these words were spoken, Tweak's eyes lit up, and he fell into thought. His eyes moved slightly, and he occasionally looked at Biggs beside him. Seeing this, Xenia also smiled with satisfaction, and looked at Abel. Obviously, in the face of interests, everyone has the need to continue the discussion. Tweak then nodded and said, "Maoyan Star is their important logistics base. Even if we cannot destroy it completely, even if we inflict heavy damage to it, it will be of great significance to our war situation. This decision to fight for the resources of the entire galaxy is naturally a good one, but I still have to go back and discuss this major matter with other members of the alliance." Abel laughed and said, "Of course, I will ask Zenny to show you the resource list in a while, and by the way, you can also go back and consider the deployment and arrangements of this operation." Tweak smiled and stood up, saying, "Okay, then we'll say goodbye first." With that, Tweak and Biggs got up and left. After the discussion ended, Li Ming was driving the giant spaceship on the way to Maoyan Star. This spaceship was the one that Li Ming hijacked near Jahu Lake. Its performance was a little poor, but there was no problem using it to reach Maoyan Star. The spaceship was continuously transmitting according to the coordinates set by Li Ming, while Li Ming sat quietly in the main cabin and continued to reassemble Larson's fragmented memories. Concentrating on studying those memory fragments, time passed little by little, but Li Ming didn't feel anything until the spaceship made a beep sound, and Li Ming's eyes suddenly opened. Unknowingly, the spaceship had arrived at Maoyan Star, and various information flashed on the operating console, which was emitted by the ground of Maoyan Star. Li Ming stretched out his right hand and input his identity aura of Brendan into it. Once confirmed, the control of the spaceship was taken over by the ground of Mayo Iron Star, and Li Ming transformed into Brendan again, waiting for the spaceship to land. After a while, the familiar building area and the familiar mountain appeared on the operating console. This was where Li Ming docked last time. Unlike last time, there were more people on the ground to greet Li Ming. The leader was Basil, and the rest were soldiers. The spaceship slowly stopped in the air, and a beam of light shone down from the bottom of the spaceship. Li Ming's figure slowly fell from it. Seeing Basil coming to greet him personally, Li Ming was also a little surprised, but he understood immediately after a look, and a smile appeared on the corner of his mouth. As soon as his feet landed, Basil walked over with a smile, and said as he approached Li Ming, "I can't believe that you actually completed this task successfully." Li Ming hurriedly bowed his head and replied, "It's natural to serve the station master." Basil nodded slightly, looked Li Ming up and down with his eyes, and his figure had already come to Li Ming and said, "Are you feeling very proud now?" Li Ming paused after hearing this, but after thinking about it carefully, he immediately understood. Brendan did have some grudges with Basil. Although this had nothing to do with Li Ming had to bear all this as he had used Brendan's identity. Basil looked at Li Ming with contempt, thinking about something. After hesitating for a while, he showed a strange smile and said, "It seems I still have to arrange a new position for you." Li Ming's face changed when he heard this. He didn't want to get involved in the feud between them, and he didn't want to be targeted by Basil. After thinking for a while, Li Ming suddenly straightened up, glanced at him fiercely, and said, "Basil, now is the period of the Galaxy War. We should work together to share the worries of Lord Cottrell. Shouldn't we put aside the grudge between you and me?" Basil became serious when he heard this. He looked at Li Ming coldly and said, "What we are doing now is to share the worries of Lord Cottrell. As the station master, it is my job to assign you a new position, and it does not involve personal issues." Chapter 367, Strange Pill. If it were any other time, Li Ming would have killed Basil instantly, but he couldn't do that now. Li Ming had no choice but to endure it temporarily. For Inksu and Liu Maxing Hukong, Li Ming couldn't do anything stupid. After some thought, Li Ming's mood had calmed down, and he said, "Since it's to help Lord Cottrell, I'll accept any task." Basil laughed and nodded repeatedly, saying, "Come with me." Basil walked away, and Li Ming narrowed his eyes, and looked at the other's figure, and quickly followed. Under Basil's leadership, Li Ming came to a building. This building was quite unique. Its basic appearance was the same as other buildings, all in the shape of a straight pencil. The only difference was that there was a disc at a certain height of this building. The discs were diffused, like umbrellas, making this building look like a bunch of umbrellas. Looking up at this strange building, and then looking at Basil in front of him, some information about this place has entered his mind. Li Ming's demeanor is calm, and he continues to follow Basil. Entering from the portal at the bottom of the building, he came to a hall. As soon as he entered here, Li Ming's face changed slightly, and his eyebrows tightened slightly. This place is extremely dark, and even the walls around are black, giving people a dark and damp feeling. This gloomy atmosphere is very strange, and makes people uncomfortable. The dim light in the hall flashes from time to time. Looking around, 4 portals appear in front of him. Basil looked back at Li Ming. A strange smile appeared at the corner of his mouth, and then walked towards one of the portals. Li Ming said nothing, but just followed him silently. Passing through this portal, Li Ming and Basil came to a large room. This room is the same as the previous one, very dark. This kind of darkness is different from the night, and there is always a cold atmosphere. Standing in front of the portal he had just walked out of, Li Ming looked around and whispered in his mind, "Alchemy." Indeed, there were a large number of alchemy instruments and materials placed here. At the farthest point, there was an elderly alien standing in front of a laboratory table operating. There were various bottles and jars on the laboratory table, which were also filled with liquids that Li Ming could not see. In the distance of the laboratory table, there were several transparent round jars that were 5 or 6 meters high and 3 meters wide. The round jars contained liquids of different colors, and some animal body tissues were soaked in them, some of which were animal viscera, and some were tentacles of thunder beasts. Seeing this, Li Ming's eyes narrowed slightly, and his face changed slightly. The alchemy here was obviously very different from the alchemy that Li Ming knew, but this was not surprising. After all, this was a civilized creature outside the Milky Way. The universe was so huge that it was normal to have some things beyond cognition. Basil glanced at the old man in the distance and said, "Mosley, I've brought the person to you." The busy old man paused, put down what he was doing, turned his head slightly, looked at Basil, looked at Li Ming, and then turned back to the experimental table. His mouth moved slightly, and an old voice came out, "This is the 15th one." Basil smiled and said, "Don't worry, the previous ones were all low-level soldiers, so such a tragedy happened. This time is different." Before Basil could continue, the old man Mosley interrupted and said, "If you deliver medicine to Tanjing, it has nothing to do with the level of civilization. Can you guarantee that you can come back alive every time you deliver medicine?" Basil was suddenly startled when he heard this, and his face changed slightly, as if hearing the name Tanjing was enough to scare him, and his mouth trembled slightly. Although Mosley did not turn around, his eyes moved, as if he was looking behind him. He laughed and said, "Let's stay and try first. Advanced civilization is better than those low-level civilizations anyway." Basil breathed a sigh of relief. He looked at Li Ming and smiled strangely. He said, "I'll leave that person to you. If there's nothing else, I'll take my leave first." Basil was ready to turn around and leave. Before he entered the portal, Mosley said, "Wait." Basil immediately took back his steps and turned to look at Mosley without saying a word. Mosley turned around slowly and said, "Please go and get my mentor's star registration. I don't quite understand some things." Basil's expression was serious at first, but he immediately relaxed and replied, "Okay." After replying these two words, Basil really entered the portal and left. At this time, only Li Ming and Mosley were left in the dark room. Mosley was a first-class civilization, and Brendan was also a first-class civilization before. Li Ming would not take this kind of people of the same level into consideration. He looked at Mosley, who was still busy, and then walked over. Although Mosley was still busy, he had already sensed Li Ming approaching him, and his hands did not stop, and he began to say, "Do you know what you are responsible for here?" Li Ming said calmly, "Just now I heard you talk about delivering medicine. It should be related to these." An old voice came out of Mosley's mouth and continued, "My old mentor Cottrell has 3 pets. My job here is to refine pills for them, and your job is to deliver the refined pills to them." At this time, Li Ming had come close to Morris, looking at him with his eyes, without saying a word. Mosley continued, "It sounds like a simple job, but 14 people have died before you." Li Ming frowned slightly when he heard this, thinking quickly in his mind, but still did not say a word. From what Mosley said, Cottrell had 3 pets, and was constantly feeding them pills. It seemed that feeding them would be very dangerous. From what Mosley said, that seemed to be what he meant. Seeing that Li Ming was indifferent, Mosley stopped the work in his hands, turned around and looked at Li Ming, with a wrinkled face showing a bit of surprise. After a few seconds, he snorted and said, "There are 3 portals at the end of the corridor over there. I have 3 pills here. You go and deliver them to them first." As he said this, Mosley raised his right hand slightly, and a blue light flashed in his palm. Sure enough, 3 pills appeared. These 3 pills were green, and looked very strange, and each of them revealed a hidden breath, as if these 3 pills would smoke. Li Ming hesitated for a moment, and took the pills in his hand. But as soon as he took the 3 pills in his hand, Li Ming's face changed slightly, and his heart suddenly clicked. Just now, when Mosley said that 14 people had died because of delivering pills, Li Ming didn't feel anything. But when he received the pills and knew that he really needed to deliver them himself, Li Ming was actually a little worried. "Go, why are you still standing here?" Mosley suddenly said again. Li Ming glanced at him again and turned to walk to the corridor on the side. Slowly walking along the dark corridor, Li Ming's eyes couldn't help but look at the beads in his hand, and the green light flashed on his palm, completely wrapping the 3 pills. As a master of alchemy, Li Ming is naturally very proficient in pills. These 3 pills are so strange that, although he can't study them in depth, he can also sense the efficacy and medicinal effect of the pills by penetrating his mental power. The green mental power slowly entered the pills. At that moment, it was as if Li Ming himself entered a space, and the breath of energy was floating everywhere. This feeling made people feel comfortable. Sensing this, Li Ming frowned slightly, and thought to himself, this elixir is so subtle. In Li Ming's cognition, the elixirs used by civilized creatures are all nebular elixir, or flowing cloud elixir, that can provide energy for the body, but the elixir in front of him is completely different. This elixir can actually increase the energy volume of civilized creatures. Simply put, the energy volume in the body of civilized creatures changes according to the level of civilization. The same level of civilization has the same energy volume in the body, and the strength between the same level depends on the origin of civilization, star country, etc. There are only two types of energy differences. One is non-advanced civilization, such as the original 9th level civilization. After giving up the advancement to the 1st level civilization, it can continue to increase the energy volume in the body through star glory. The other is a rare outlier like Li Ming, who has multiple civilizations in one body, and the energy volume is naturally different from the general. However, after seeing the elixir in his hand, Li Ming's cognition has also changed, because these elixirs in his hand can increase the energy volume in the body. In other words, even if you don't give up the advancement and are not a multi-civilization body, just taking this elixir can increase your own energy volume. Sensing this information, Li Ming couldn't help but pause, looking at the 3 pills, and whispered in surprise, "Wow. This is awesome." Chapter 368, Unfathomable. After Li Ming used his consciousness to sense it more deeply, he could not help but frown again, shook his head slightly, and his face suddenly became ugly again. He thought to himself, no, this pill, actually. Li Ming's face suddenly became ugly. The pill in front of him did have substances that could increase the body's energy volume, but it also had another thing, which was consciousness. Li Ming had naturally added consciousness to the pill before, but what Li Ming refined was the beast spirit pill and the beast soul pill. Through the consciousness in the pill, the beasts could be controlled after taking it, but the pill in front of him was not for beasts, but for humans, which made Li Ming a little puzzled. Li Ming walked to the 3 portals. He looked at the pills in his hand with a pair of eyes. His face was a bit ugly. He thought to himself, the energy in these 3 pills is not for animals, but for humans. Why do we need to add consciousness? Who do we want to control? Besides, Mosley once said that he gave the pills to Cottrell's 3 pets. Is there any difference between these pets? Thinking secretly, Li Ming clenched his palm, put away the pills, and turned to enter one of the portals. With a flash of light, Li Ming appeared in a new environment. This is not a room, but a mountain similar to a paradise. There is sunlight above his head, a stream in front of him, and a stone road under his feet. The most important thing is that there is a wooden arch bridge on the stream. Although it is not big, the style is fascinating. There is a small waterfall upstream of the stream, and clear water keeps flowing down. There is a small lake downstream of the stream, and the clear water surface ripples slightly. And in the distance opposite the arch bridge is a 2-story attic built on a boulder, which looks comfortable. It is not an exaggeration to call such an environment a paradise. Li Ming just looked around and was completely immersed in it. He could not extricate himself. But Li Ming knew very well that this environment was not what ordinary aliens wanted. It was more like an environment for humans to live in. Although everything in front of him seemed real, it was not so real, like an illusion. Li Ming narrowed his eyes slightly and scanned the surroundings with his wisdom eyes again. After looking through his wisdom eyes, Li Ming immediately frowned. This was not really a paradise. Although the water and other objects in the environment were real, there were dense energy barriers in the distance outside the environment. It's an energy space. Li Ming whispered secretly. The so-called energy space is just like Ingayanshan, but Ingayanshan is much more advanced than this place. Here, it is just a huge object that contains a special environment. Seeing the doorway, Li Ming said nothing and walked quickly towards the attic. Just as he walked to the wooden arch bridge, the calm lake surface suddenly made a bang sound, and a person's head emerged from the water. This person had short black hair and a black cloth tied on her forehead. Her pure and moving face was a bit serious and a bit cute. What surprised Li Ming was that this person looked exactly like a human. Li Ming only took a look and his face changed instantly. He thought to himself, human? Li Ming was surprised when the girl suddenly jumped out of the water with a bang and came to the arch bridge. She was covered with a black veil, her feet were bare, and her white legs were exposed. She just stared at Li Ming fiercely. Is it to send the pill? A cold voice came from her mouth. Li Ming bowed his head and handed over a pill. The black-veiled woman looked at the pill, then looked at Li Ming, snorted coldly, took the pill, and swallowed it directly. Seeing this, Li Ming said nothing and turned around slowly, preparing to leave. But before Li Ming walked far, he immediately noticed something strange behind him. The black-veiled woman's face suddenly changed, and she waved her right hand, and a fireball flew out of her hand. Li Ming's powerful mental power had naturally predicted it in advance, but Li Ming's body did not move, but just paused and stopped in place. With a muffled bang, the fireball that seemed to be only the size of a palm spread out behind Li Ming, like a gasoline bomb that suddenly exploded, and the flames completely engulfed Li Ming. After the fire, Li Ming was normal, and a layer of golden light on the surface of his body was shining. With the magic shield on his body, Li Ming was naturally not afraid of such an attack. With his eyes slightly turned back, Li Ming whispered, Master Tanjing, I'm just a pill delivery. Why do you embarrass me? After saying this, Li Ming continued to walk towards the portal. The black-veiled woman Tanjing frowned slightly, staring at Li Ming with her eyes, and did not make any extra moves. After exiting the portal, Li Ming returned to the dark room outside, but he also obtained some key information from Tanjing's brain. He then looked at the second portal, thinking, the so-called pet turned out to be a civilized creature. Cottrell, no, Mayo, this guy's really unfathomable. Taking a deep breath, Li Ming moved and entered the second portal. The light flashed, and Li Ming came to a new environment again. Here, all he could see were crystal blocks on the ground, and the sky was pure black. Li Ming narrowed his eyes and looked around, and finally locked onto one of the larger crystals. He walked over slowly, without saying a word, flipped his right hand, placed a pill on the crystal block, and whispered, I'm only responsible for delivering pills, and I don't want to cause trouble. Having said this, Li Ming turned around and left. The crystal blocks here are not unfamiliar. They are just like the crystal block buildings on the planet Isaiah. On the crystal block where Li Ming placed the pill, there is a silicon-based alien. However, this alien is hidden in it, and can only be seen by the wise eye. At this time, a face slowly emerged inside the crystal block, as if someone is looking at you through the glass. Watching Li Ming leave, the alien did not do much, but showed a strange smile. After walking out of the portal, Li Ming immediately turned around, and entered the last portal. Before entering, Li Ming had already prepared himself mentally. Through the first two portals, Li Ming learned that Cottrell's purpose was to use the consciousness in the pill to control Tanjing and the silicon-based alien. This third space would naturally be no exception. But after entering the last space, Li Ming's face suddenly changed. This is actually a huge cave deep in the ground, surrounded by rock walls, and in the middle of the cave there is a figure 4 or 5 meters long and wide. It looks like a spider, but there is a sickle-like blade behind its long butt, which looks extremely sharp. From an alien perspective, this thing is a beast, but when Li Ming sensed it with his spiritual power, he frowned slightly and thought to himself, it doesn't have the breath of wild beasts and demon beasts, but it has a bit of the breath of civilized creatures. Could it be that there are civilized creatures that look like this? Li Ming was secretly surprised. At this time, the spider monster stared at Li Ming closely, and after a chuckle, he said, in the dark cave, refining spirit pill, and aliens will be a good match. A gentle and sinister voice came out immediately, and before Li Ming could react, the monster suddenly opened its mouth, and a brown silk thread suddenly spurted out of its mouth and headed straight for Li Ming. Li Ming could naturally predict it in advance, and his body stepped back, and suddenly swung his right hand, and threw the pill out. Because he could predict it, plus the ability of wisdom eyes, Li Ming saw everything in advance, and while dodging, he also threw the pill in his hand. Between the pill and Li Ming, the spider monster chose the pill without hesitation, and the brown silk thread sucked the pill as soon as it turned, and then pulled it back into its mouth. But the spider monster's eyes showed a strange look, and it continued to stare at Li Ming. Li Ming looked back at him coldly and gradually stepped back until he left the portal. Back in the dark room, Li Ming's face darkened a little, and after hesitating for a while, he quickly walked out of the corridor. Chapter 369, Angry Tanging. In the dark hall, Mosley was concentrating on the star book in his hand in front of the laboratory table. After hearing footsteps, his eyes suddenly turned and looked towards the corridor, only to see Li Ming walking out. Mosley was surprised and looked Li Ming up and down. Have all the pills been delivered? Mosley asked in disbelief. Li Ming nodded slightly and said nothing. Mosley took a deep breath and his eyes changed a lot when he looked at Li Ming. But Li Ming's eyes, when he looked at him, changed slightly. His eyes moved back and forth between Mosley's face and the star book in his hand, and the corners of his mouth suddenly rose slightly, revealing a hint of a smile. Li Ming's smile was very strange, and that hint of a smile was like something terrible was about to happen. Mosley frowned for a moment. His expression suddenly became serious, and he said, What are you laughing at? Without saying a word, Li Ming suddenly swung out his right hand, and then a shadowy arm with a green light extended out, and the shadowy green hand grabbed the other party's head. Without waiting for the other party to react, Li Ming's right hand pulled again, and his soul directly left his body. Without the energy body, Mosley's body fell to the ground with a plop, and there was no movement. Li Ming squeezed his right hand hard, and the green light shadow then turned into a vortex, swallowing and absorbing Mosley's soul. He took 2 steps forward lightly, and grabbed with his right hand again, and the star book that was originally in Mosley's hand came into Li Ming's hand. Holding this star book, Li Ming's eyes looked at Mosley's body on the ground again, and his left hand casually swung, and with a muffled bang, Mosley's body disappeared directly out of thin air. After doing this, Li Ming's eyes turned back to the star book in his hand, and his eyes were focused, and he looked at it carefully. After only a rough look, Li Ming frowned, opened his mouth slightly, and whispered, "Death medicine." Whispering, Li Ming's eyes moved slightly, and he looked at it again. Among these star books, Death Medicine Alchemy is a high-level secret star book. Although it does not require wisdom eyes to read, the content inside is extremely profound. With Li Ming's qualifications, it is naturally difficult to understand. However, Li Ming has the 6-domain enhanced star book, which makes Li Ming learn other star books faster. His eyes opened slightly, and his eyeballs moved for a while, from the original black to a green triangle, which is the 6-domain enhanced star book has been activated. With the enhanced star book and the wisdom eye ability, learning and recording the contents of the star book is like reading a book for Li Ming. As long as he has read it, Li Ming can reach the master level of operation. With his eyes fixed on the star book, Li Ming's mind also entered it little by little, just like Li Ming himself came to a dark space. The content of the star book is like the stars in the night sky, flashing little by little. Many strange methods of alchemy slowly emerged, which made Li Ming more cautious. The refining of these pills is extraordinary, not just referring to the method of refining pills, but more to the efficacy of the refined pills. One of the pills, called Refining Spirit Pill, caught Li Ming's attention. This pill was the 3 green pills that Li Ming had just distributed. This pill did add some human consciousness during the refining process, and its efficacy did have the effect of increasing the energy volume of the human body, but there were also some side effects. Aliens who often take it will be subconsciously influenced by consciousness. Simply put, if you keep taking it in large quantities, you will be eroded by the other party's consciousness, and will involuntarily identify that consciousness as your master. This is similar to the beast soul pill that Li Ming had refined before. When consciousness is added to the pill, the beast will identify itself as the master after taking it. The effect of this refining spirit pill is the same as that of the beast soul pill, but the difference is that it is only effective for civilized creatures. In addition to this, the refining spirit pill has 2 side effects. One is physical damage and the other is addictive. Simply put, this refining spirit pill is an alien poison that makes people unable to stop. However, this is only the refining spirit pill. There are many other strange pills in this dead medicine star book. As he kept flipping through it, Li Ming's face became more and more ugly. In addition to refining pills, this book also contains some strange abilities. If the star books that Li Ming practiced before were all famous and upright, then the contents of this star book are all evil. Li Ming had previously obtained a light medicine star book in Larson's former residence on the Isaiah star. Now compare it with this dead medicine refining pill. It is completely opposite, the opposite extreme. Looking at it, Li Ming collected his mind, sighed slightly, and said to himself, I didn't expect that there would be such a poisonous thing. He clenched his right hand and collected the star book. His eyes turned and looked back to the direction of the corridor. These three so-called pets have a lot of interactions with Cottrell. Let's see if we can get some information about Cottrell from them. With that, Li Ming turned around and walked back to the corridor. Li Ming had no interest in the spider monster and the silicon-based life. He glanced and went directly to where Tanjing was. After passing through the portal, Li Ming returned to the paradise. He glanced around and finally locked onto the attic on the second floor, then walked over quickly. After walking across the arch bridge, Li Ming's figure paused. A high temperature suddenly approached his body. Li Ming was shocked and quickly raised his right hand to block it in front of him. The golden shield appeared again. Bang! A muffled sound was heard, and the black figure of Tanjing had already appeared, and his colleague punched him. He only felt a powerful energy spread out, and the golden shield in front of him squeaked and appeared with more than a dozen cracks. Li Ming looked serious. He really didn't expect that Tanjing was so powerful. Bang! There was another muffled sound, and the golden shield was instantly shattered. Li Ming's figure retreated to the outside of the arch bridge, but Tanjing was still unyielding. She swept her cold eyes over here and flew over to attack again. Wait. Li Ming suddenly raised his hand and shouted loudly. Tanjing ignored it and continued to fly over. Li Ming couldn't help but look worried, thinking, damn, is this woman a lunatic? Muttering in his heart, he had no intention of continuing to entangle with the other party and turned around and ran straight to the portal. After passing through the portal, Li Ming's face was very ugly. He originally planned to use the wisdom eye to obtain some information, but he didn't expect the other party to attack him directly without saying a word. He sighed softly, turned his eyes, and looked at the other two portals, but just when Li Ming was hesitating whether to enter, a burst of footsteps suddenly came from outside the corridor. Mosley! Mosley! Two quick shouts were heard, and Li Ming was startled. His body surface flashed blue light quickly, and then his body shape twisted and changed, and his appearance changed from human to alien Mosley. After the transformation was successful, Li Ming's eyes checked his body up and down, and after confirming that the transformation was successful, he slowly walked outside. The alien in the hall outside at this time was Basil, but he looked flustered and seemed very anxious. When he saw Mosley in the corridor, he immediately stepped forward and said, Mosley, someone has invaded Mayo Iron Star. Mosley's face changed slightly when he heard this. After hesitating for a while, he said, you should find Lord Cottrell for this, right? Basil was startled when he heard this and replied, did you forget that Lord Cottrell is not on Mayo Iron Star? Before leaving, Lord Cottrell told you that if someone invaded, let Lord Tanjing deal with it. Mosley's expression changed when he heard this, and he nodded slightly and laughed, and said quickly, I really forgot about this. Okay, then you go first. I will inform Tanjing. Basil looked puzzled, looked up and down at Mosley, and then turned and left. Watching the other party leave, Li Ming's transformed Mosley turned his eyes slightly in thought, and turned around, and walked back to the depths of the corridor. After re-exploring Mosley's memory and filtering the information in his brain again, the information about Tanjing and Cottrell emerged. Although Li Ming absorbed all of Mosley's consciousness, he had not yet carefully examined it, and the scene just now appeared, which almost exposed his flaws. According to the information in Mosley's mind, Tanjing's mission is to be responsible for the safety of the entire Mayo Iron Star's logistics resources, and if there is any danger, he must immediately notify the other party. Passing through the portal, Li Ming returned to the space where Tanjing was. Except for the sound of the waterfall, there was no other movement. Although he came here as Mosley, Li Ming was still frightened by the crazy attack of this person before, so he stood there motionless. A moment later, a girl walked out of the second floor attic. Judging from the age and appearance of the earth, she might be only 17 or 18 years old. She wore a black vest on her upper body and black shorts on her lower body. The cloth band on her forehead fluttered in the wind behind her head. Mosley, what's the matter? Tanjing said coldly. Chapter 370, Strong Strength. Li Ming stared at the other person with his eyes, his expression serious, and said, something happened outside, and you need to calm it down. Tanjing's expression was stern and cold. Without saying a word, he disappeared in a flash. The next moment, he appeared at the portal, and then flashed and left. Li Ming hesitated in place, and turned around and left. When Li Ming came to the dark corridor outside, Tanjing's figure had disappeared, which made Li Ming's face change slightly. This person named Tanjing is a 1.2 level civilization, but his strength is indeed extraordinary. The few flashes just now have surprised Li Ming. This person's strength should not be underestimated. Although Li Ming is a multi-civilization body and his energy volume is also extraordinary, Li Ming still has to be cautious here. Before he figured out the secret of Ringsu, Li Ming naturally has to endure it. Arriving at the laboratory table in the hall, an idea suddenly occurred to Li Ming. Looking at the experimental materials in front of him, Li Ming secretly said, if Tanjing continues to take the refining spirit pill, she will inevitably become a tool for others. If my consciousness is added to the refining spirit pill. Thinking of this, Li Ming let out a low he sound, and the originally sinister plan seemed to become interesting now. But as soon as the laughter stopped, Li Ming frowned again, and let out a hiss inhalation sound, and said to himself again, overdose of refining spirit pill will cause damage to the body, and the temper will become more and more irritable. It's not good for a little girl to have such a bad temper. As he said this, Li Ming's eyes looked back and forth at the materials on the laboratory table, and finally smiled and said, then I will try to change the formula. As he said this, Li Ming was ready to start the operation, but at this moment, the ground suddenly trembled slightly, and a muffled bang sound came from his ears. It seemed that something exploded outside. Li Ming raised his head slightly, and after rolling his eyes a few times, his right hand suddenly turned over, and a blue light flashed in his palm. A small green dragon flashed out, and then he waved it, and the green dragon turned into a green light and shot out, and disappeared into the dark wall. No matter what happened outside, it would be best to release the green dragon to check it out. In case of any danger, Li Ming could also avoid it. After releasing the green dragon, Li Ming felt relieved and started his own experiment. At this moment, it was indeed a mess outside. Many buildings in the construction area had been destroyed, and flames and thick smoke were constantly floating. Above the construction area, 4 figures were confronting each other. On one side were Tanjing and Basil, and on the other side were Yeager and Biggs. Biggs held the artifact Huan Meng in one hand, and looked at the opposite side with contempt, while Yeager held a huge black blade with a stern expression. Tanjing looked at the two with contempt, and the whole body surface began to burn with black flames. Basil beside him looked terrified and said tremblingly, Master Tanjing, the warehouses below are all important places. We can't damage them anymore. Tanjing's eyes turned slightly to Basil, and then looked at the two people in the distance. Without saying a word, the flames on his body suddenly burned more fiercely. A muffled sound of bang was heard, and the sound was like a ball of fire suddenly blown by the wind. Tanjing's figure disappeared directly on the spot. Jija's eyebrows tightened, and the black figure also flashed and disappeared. The figures of the two disappeared almost at the same time, but the next moment, in the air between the two people, there was a sudden boom. A deafening sound. Tanjing, who was covered in flames, collided with Jija. Jija held the black blade with both hands, in a chopping posture, while Tanjing just clenched his fist with one hand, and used his fist, to catch the opponent's attack. The energy between the two kept colliding with each other, and formed a shadow energy ball at the point where the blade and fist touched. As the energy between the two confronted each other, the energy ball continued to grow like a balloon being inflated. In just a few seconds, the energy ball enveloped both of them. Jija gnashed his teeth, and used all his strength in a tense state, but Tanjing seemed to be able to deal with it more easily. Looking at Jija's struggling appearance, Tanjing suddenly exerted force with his right fist, and a muffled bang sounded. The shadow energy ball broke apart, and the powerful energy turned into a shock wave and spread around in a circular ring. The strong shock wave covered a large area in a blink of an eye. Wherever the shock wave passed, it was like a hurricane, with sand and rocks breaking and dust flying. Even the top of the nearest high-rise building was instantly turned into ashes. Under such a powerful force, Jija's body was instantly bounced away like a black bullet. Boom. A sound was heard, and Jija crashed into the building on the ground, and several high-rise buildings collapsed under this impact. As soon as the shock wave ended, a white cat beast suddenly flew over with an arc of electricity. Tanjing's eyes turned, and his left hand suddenly grabbed it in the air. A tongue of fire flew out along Tanjing's arm. As soon as the tongue of fire flew a short distance, it turned into a huge flaming palm and pinched the white cat beast's neck. Suddenly, a kai 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 sound was heard. It was like a little white mouse being pinched, and it kept struggling and shouting. Tanjing turned his eyes and looked at Biggs in the distance. Then he swung his left hand, and the flame was disconnected from his left hand, but the flame that pinched the white cat beast did not disappear, but turned into long ropes of fire that wrapped the white cat back and forth. Seeing this, Biggs frowned, his face changed slightly, and his eyes immediately turned to Tanjing. At the first glance, Tanjing was still in the same place, but the next second, he saw a flash of fire in front of him, and Tanjing's figure had come close, and the huge fist rushed straight to Biggs. Bang! The fist seemed to hit a layer of transparent glass, but after a second, a squeak sound continued to be heard, and cracks appeared one after another. There was a phantom barrier protecting Biggs' body, but under Tanjing's fist, the phantom barrier was obviously unable to support it. With a snap sound, the barrier shattered directly like glass. As the barrier shattered, Tanjing's fist pressed forward. Biggs' expression changed drastically, and his face turned pale instantly, but it was too late. Without time to think, Biggs quickly waved his left hand, and a whirlwind appeared in his palm, aiming at the welcoming Tanjing and slapping it directly. Bang! The two energies collided violently, and Biggs' body flew out directly. Boom! Biggs fell to the ground like Yeager before. Dust and smoke rose up, and a big pit appeared on the ground, and Tanjing looked at that direction coldly, and his figure slowly floated over. At this time, in the smoke and dust on the ground, Biggs slowly stood up, raised his eyes slightly, looked at the sky, clenched his right hand, and put away the illusion. His eyeballs turned in his eye sockets, and looked at Yeager on the side. Yeager also looked over here, and seeing that Tanjing was getting closer and closer, Yeager's eyes turned and thought, and after hesitating for a few seconds, he said, "This person is not weak. If you and I continue to waste like this, it will be very disadvantageous for us. If other people come to support us later, I'm afraid it will be difficult for you and me to get away." Hearing Yeager's retreat, Biggs looked at the sky coldly and said, "Okay, let's go." As soon as the voice fell, the two flew up and fled to the distance. Tanjing was just about to continue to fight, but when he saw the two people fleeing in panic, he couldn't help but snorted, looked at Basil behind him, and said, "The next step is up to you." After saying so, Tanjing turned around and flew away. Basil saw the direction where Biggs and Yeager were going away, so he naturally didn't dare to chase them easily. He took out a metal ball and tapped it lightly. Suddenly, a blue light flashed out. Basil then said sternly, "Lock the position of those two people and destroy them." As soon as the voice fell, a series of aircraft took off from the base near the construction area, like a series of bombers, heading straight for the direction where Biggs and Yeager fled. At this moment, Li Ming was still busy in the dark room. In front of the experimental table, Li Ming's hands kept operating, sometimes picking up this material, sometimes picking up that medicine bottle. At the portal in the room, a light flashed, and the figure of Tanjing had appeared. Chapter 371, Consciousness Pill Corrosion. Tanjing walked quickly along the stone road, while Li Ming was ignored by her like air, walked past the experimental table and headed straight for the corridor. Li Ming did not move, his hands continued to be busy, but his eyes turned slightly, and looked in the direction of the corridor. In the corridor was Tanjing's back, and it disappeared little by little in the dim light. After confirming that the other party had entered that space through the portal, Li Ming's face instantly became ugly, and the operation of his hands also stopped immediately. His figure stood still, his eyes staring straight at the corridor. Li Ming had seen all the battles outside just now with his flying dragon. This girl named Tanjing was not ordinary, and her strength was very likely to be above Li Ming. Who is this guy? How can she be so powerful? Is she just Cottrell's pet? Li Ming looked at him in a daze, muttering to himself. His eyes suddenly turned and looked at the materials on the table. Then his hands danced and began to flip through the materials. The materials here are rich and complete, and there are many that Li Ming has never seen before. Although Li Ming also has a lot of materials on him, they are still dwarfed by the materials here. Li Ming is now fully devoted to the research and development of the refining spirit pill. On the one hand, he combines Mosley's memory, and on the other hand, he combines the star book of the dead medicine refining pill. If it is just to refine the refining spirit pill, it is not difficult for Li Ming, but now Li Ming wants to change the side effects of this pill, which requires Li Ming to explore little by little according to the formula and method of this pill. It is obviously extremely difficult to develop a pill. Even if it is modified on the basis of the refining spirit pill, it is not an easy task for Li Ming. According to Mosley's memory information, the content of this dead medicine refining pill star book is all from Cottrell's masterpiece, part of which is developed by Cottrell himself, and the other part is modified using the star book content of other civilizations. Li Ming already knew that Cottrell was Mayo, and Mayo was a genius synthetic alchemist. In addition, he was very likely to have cultivated the ability of the 6-domain Maxing Hukang. With a genius mind and acquired Hukang, this person's strength is naturally extraordinary. Now Li Ming has taken up the position of Mosley, and he has to refine pills for the 3 guys every day. Li Ming doesn't care about the 2 guys, the spider monster and the silicon-based life, but Li Ming has changed the consciousness in the pill, taken by Tanjing into his own consciousness. As for the transformation and redevelopment of the pill, Li Ming has not made much progress. After all, Li Ming's qualifications are limited, but it is not without some results. Now, several materials of the refining pill have been replaced by other materials by Li Ming, eliminating the damage to the body itself, and at the same time, the consciousness inside will cover the previous ones little by little. But the addictiveness and irritability of the pill cannot be changed. Addictiveness and irritability are very terrifying. In other words, if Tanjing does not get the refining pill within a certain period of time, then the irritability will suddenly break out, and at that time, it will be very terrifying for his strength. At least there are enough materials here. Li Ming can refine a large number of pills. Li Ming's alchemy skills are naturally much stronger than the previous Mosley. Mosley can only refine 1 pill at a time, while Li Ming is almost unrestricted. Every time he delivers medicine, Li Ming goes by himself, and when he returns to the laboratory, Li Ming transforms into the appearance of Mosley. Time passes little by little. In addition to refining pills, Li Ming studies the light medicine star and the dead medicine alchemy star every day. These 2 star books come from Larson and Mayo respectively. The 2 people also cooperated before, but their routes are opposite. Mayo's is more inclined to the dark series, while Larson's focuses on the light series, which also makes Li Ming puzzled. In addition to these things, Li Ming often releases flying dragons to find out whether Cottrell has returned to Mayo Iron Star. After all, finding Cottrell is Li Ming's ultimate goal. He has not seen Cottrell since he arrived at Mayo Iron Star. However, in order to find out the secret of Ringsu, Li Ming naturally has to be patient. Li Ming is busy refining medicine and delivering medicine, while many places in the Milky Way have become a mess. Warships can be seen everywhere in various galaxies, and the flames of war are burning everywhere. At this moment, an A-shaped warship is flying slowly. In the main cabin of the spacecraft, Cottrell, wearing a mask, sits quietly in front of the operating table, and there is already a huge screen on the operating table. The screens show the images of 2 aliens. One is the supreme leader of the large Magellanic system, Simandl, and the other is the commander of the small Magellanic system, Sterius. The 3 are talking about something through the connection. Sterius smiled and said, "The war situation on my side has basically stabilized. 4/5 of the area is under control, thanks to the timely delivery of supplies from Cottrell." Cottrell smiled and said, "Although it has crossed half of the galaxy, fortunately it has not affected your war. Isn't that what we said when we formed an alliance?" Ha ha ha. The 2 of them talked back and forth, and laughed from time to time, but Simandl had a gloomy face. After looking at Cottrell, he said with some displeasure, "Cottrell, why have the Enna people been fighting to the death for so long? And a large number of reinforcement have arrived?" Cottrell's face changed slightly when he heard this, and he couldn't help but fall into deep thought. And Simandl continued, "It will be very disadvantageous for us to continue to be in a stalemate like this." Cottrell nodded slightly, already thinking about something. His eyes turned slightly, and said, "There are indeed some accidents on the planet Inna. I can't contact Axe for the time being, so I can only make a decision after I return to Maoan." Huh. Simandl snorted in dissatisfaction, and said, "My position is very passive now. The base is consuming a lot of energy every moment, so you'd better solve this problem as soon as possible." Cottrell nodded slightly, hesitated for a moment and said, "Don't worry, I will reply to you as soon as I arrive at Maoan. Besides, don't you control a lot of galaxies?" Simandl's eyes then widened a few points, and he slammed the scepter in his hand to the ground with force. He said with a somewhat ugly face, "I should have told you about the importance of Inna. It has nothing to do with the galaxies I have occupied." Seeing that the other party was angry, Cottrell didn't say much, and disconnected the connection. With a pair of eyes looking at the operating table, the expression under the mask was somewhat unhappy, and he whispered to himself, "You actually talk to me like this? One day, I will let you know who is the real ruler here." The spacecraft continued to fly in the universe, and its destination was Maoan Star. At this moment, Li Ming on Maoan Star was holding the elixir and preparing to walk in the corridor. He looked at the portal in front of him, smiled slightly and walked in. The clear sound of water kept ringing in his ears. Tanjing was standing on the arch bridge without saying a word. Sensing the movement of the portal, he turned his head and looked over. In the past, Tanjing would have taken action directly, but now he looked at Li Ming and couldn't raise his hand. He had a serious expression and had no interest in Li Ming, but his thoughts and body were completely incompatible. Every time he saw Li Ming, Tanjing would have such a strange experience. Li Ming is now much more confident and bold. After the influence of the elixir during this period of time, the Cottrell consciousness in Tanjing's mind has basically been covered by Li Ming's. With this awareness, at least the other party stopped attacking Li Ming. This effect was exactly what Li Ming wanted. With a smile on his face, he was about to approach, but Tanjing suddenly had a cold look in his eyes, turned his body abruptly, and looked at Li Ming fiercely. Li Ming stopped immediately, and his face was full of caution. "I obviously hate you, but why don't you want to do it?" Tanjing said directly. Li Ming paused after hearing this, hesitated for a while, and said hesitantly, "Maybe. I send you medicine every day, and you are touched." Tanjing frowned, and when she heard Li Ming's voice, it seemed as if she had been very close to him. This inexplicable feeling made Tanjing a little overwhelmed. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelos. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 372, The Girl Full of Hatred. Tanjing didn't know that the pills she took every day were all Li Ming's consciousness, so she was closer to Li Ming in her subconscious mind, and it was harder for her to have any ill will towards him. Li Ming had seen it from Tanjing's behavior, so he moved his body with confidence and walked over. When he got close to her, Li Ming raised his right hand, and a green pill was already in his hand. Facing the pill given by Li Ming, Tanjing had almost no resistance, and quickly took it with his hand, and put it into his mouth. Looking at the other person's profile, Li Ming's eyes suddenly became a little dull, and a few strands of hair occasionally slapped on his face. His pure and white cheeks made people look at him like a treasure. He had never been in such close contact before, and now he suddenly looked at each other like this, and a strange feeling emerged strongly in his heart, as if he was about to take a roller coaster, and the thrill had not yet arrived, but the feeling had already filled his body. It was like the feeling of drinking ice cola in the summer weather of 40 degrees, which was very wonderful. Li Ming was watching this scene, and the other party also looked back at Li Ming inadvertently. When the two looked at each other, the other party's cold face was like a basin of cold water poured on him, which made Li Ming wake up suddenly. He thought to himself, "Damn it, what the hell am I doing? What happened to me just now?" Li Ming came to the edge of the arch bridge, looked at the stream under the bridge, took a few deep breaths to calm down, and suddenly asked, "How did you know Cottrell?" Tanjing paused after hearing this, and her eyes were stern, as if this was an extremely sensitive question. Because of the problem of consciousness in her brain, even if Tanjing didn't like it, she didn't get angry, but she didn't say a word. Li Ming continued to look at the stream under the bridge and said, "This is really a long story. If you don't want to talk about it, then I'll tell it, and you listen." Tanjing looked at Li Ming coldly, still silent. Li Ming suddenly turned his head, looked at the other party, and said, "Then, let's start from the Pegasus galaxy. Tanjing's origin is a rare aerospace civilization. The specific origin and origin planet must be deeply excavated from her memory. Li Ming's eyes have not seen that far. From the information that Li Ming's eyes have seen, Tanjing's earliest appearance was a prison in the Pegasus galaxy. Like ordinary prisoners, she was either mining or doing the lowest things. Li Ming had also had the experience of a miner, and knew the life in that environment. Until one day, the appearance of a man changed her fate. That was Cottrell, who was now wearing a mask. Cottrell rescued her, and adopted her by his side, to help her advance and grow. It was Cottrell who supplied her with the refining spirit pill, the pill that could improve herself above the same level. From then on, it was out of control, and Tanjing could no longer leave the shackles of this pill. From the original dosage of 1 pill a year to the current 1 pill a day. Of course, at that time, the refining spirit pill had not yet been added to Cottrell's consciousness, but with Tanjing's continuous growth and strength, coupled with the side effects of the pill, Tanjing, who had grown up in hatred, became even more irritable. In order to better control Tanjing, Cottrell began to add his own consciousness to it. In Li Ming's eyes, whether it was Tanjing's earliest experience or the experience after meeting Cottrell, it was all dark. But for Tanjing, meeting Cottrell seemed to let her see the dawn. Cottrell promised to provide Rinxu to make Tanjing stronger, but that would take time. Tanjing longed for power, because the seeds of hatred had taken root in her heart, and the desire for revenge almost occupied everything. These contents came from Li Ming's mouth, just like reenacting Tanjing's past experiences, as if Li Ming had experienced them personally. But when Li Ming said these, he did not mention the consciousness in the refining spirit pill, let alone Cottrell's identity as Mayo. But just after saying this, Tanjing's face changed slightly, and her body turned slightly, from facing Li Ming sideways to facing Li Ming directly, with a pair of eyes emitting dim light staring at Li Ming motionlessly. A breeze brushed past, and her hair kept fluttering on half of her face. There were strands of hair at the corners of her mouth and eyes, and the band behind her head also fluttered in the wind, but her gloomy face was full of coldness. "How do you know? Who are you?" After a moment of silence, Tanjing suddenly asked. Li Ming turned his head, and looked at the other person directly. After pausing for a few seconds, he smiled lightly. The smile was very low, as if it was ridiculous, as if it was disdainful, and more like giving up some idea. He said, "I'm just a person who delivers pills." Tanjing continued to look at Li Ming. Her eyebrows kept jumping, and she whispered involuntarily, "I have been with Cottrell for so long, and have never seen you, but I feel like I have seen you before." Li Ming nodded slightly, took a deep breath, and turned away. The so-called deja vu is entirely because Li Ming added his own consciousness to the elixir. If he said he had never seen it before, then he had never seen it before. Originally, Li Ming only wanted to find out information about Cottrell, but the more he explored, the more he saw the miserable past of a lonely girl. Li Ming always had an inexplicable sense of intimacy when he saw the other party. It might be because the other party had an almost identical appearance to humans. It felt like Li Ming came to a foreign land and suddenly met someone from his hometown, just like meeting someone from his own country in a foreign country, just like meeting someone from the same hometown city as himself in another province. It was like meeting someone from the same mother planet in an alien civilization. However, Li Ming had not yet explored the origin of the other party's civilization, but the appearance made Li Ming fascinated. Walking out of the portal and walking along the corridor towards the experimental table, Li Ming's body surface had already glowed blue, and his body twisted and changed and turned into the appearance of Mosley again. The exchange of these two identities has made Li Ming a habit, and it is also a greater guarantee of safety. Just as he stood in front of the experimental table, the portal in the distance behind him suddenly flashed with light. A soldier came over. When he saw Li Ming, he bowed his head and said, "Lord Mosley, Commander Cottrell wants to see you." Li Ming was shocked when he heard this, and his face changed instantly. He thought to himself, Cottrell is back. He was even a little excited in his heart. Thinking this in his heart, he replied, "I'll go right away." In the construction area, the buildings that were previously destroyed by Biggs and Yeager have basically been repaired. That little bit of damage is just the tip of the iceberg for the huge construction area, not worth mentioning, and not even a harassment. However, it is already very difficult to sneak in here quietly through the heavy siege. At this time, on a huge high-rise building in the center of the construction area, Cottrell was standing still in a room with only a window. Through the transparent window, he could see the scenery of the entire construction area, with dense buildings one after another. Many aircraft shuttled back and forth in it. Cottrell looked solemn, and his eyes were looking into the distance, as if he was thinking about something. A light buzzing sound was heard, and the portal in the room suddenly lit up. Two figures walked out. One was Basil, and the other was Mosley, who was transformed by Li Ming. Cottrell turned around slightly, glanced at the two, and sat down at the table. The two bowed their heads. "Sit down." Cottrell raised his hand, and motioned for the two to sit down. Li Ming and Basil looked at each other, before sitting down at the table. Cottrell glanced at the two and said, "Tell me about the situation." Basil looked at Mosley beside him, then looked at Cottrell, and said first, "There is nothing unusual on Mayo Iron Star. It's just that two enemies sneaked in some time ago, and wanted to destroy the warehouse, but they were repelled by Lord Tanjing." Cottrell nodded slightly, said nothing, and turned his eyes to Mosley. Li Ming smiled faintly and replied, "There is no problem on my side. The pills are supplied on time. There is no problem at all." Cottrell looked calm and nodded slightly, saying, "This is the best. The war situation in the Milky Way is now stable. Mayo Iron Star is a resource-rich place, and your positions are extremely important. However, there is something I need to tell you in advance." Chapter 373 Incarnation. Cottrell's expression suddenly became serious. His expression could not be seen from the mask, but the sharp eyes in his eyes made people feel a sense of solemnity. At this time, Li Ming had already used his wisdom to see through the information in Cottrell's mind, which surprised Li Ming. Cottrell said coldly, "My laboratory will be moved here from the Pegasus galaxy recently. As my confidants, you two should take this matter seriously. This matter should not alarm anyone." Basil's expression was lifted when he heard this, and he immediately replied, "I understand." Li Ming just nodded slightly and said nothing. At this time, Cottrell slowly stood up and said solemnly, "I will personally prepare the deployment of the laboratory. During the time I was away, I have already looked at the war situation in the Milky Way. Now is the best time. You two must cooperate with all your strength." Basil immediately stood up, nodded vigorously, and said, "Commander Cottrell, don't worry. I will make sure everything is foolproof." Li Ming glanced at Basil, and slowly stood up, but still nodded slightly and said nothing. Cottrell nodded slightly, and replied with satisfaction, "You go back and prepare first, and wait for my order at any time." "Yes." Li Ming and Basil saluted again, and then turned and left together. Watching the two turn around, Cottrell's eyes suddenly fixed on Li Ming's illusion of Mosley. His eyes were full of complex colors, both doubts and surprise. Leaving this house, Basil looked resolute and walked away quickly, but Li Ming walked slowly behind him. His eyes kept turning. "Cottrell, it's really Mayo, but why can we still explore the information in his brain? Didn't he practice Ukon?" Li Ming frowned slightly, not understanding the meaning. Halfway through, Li Ming suddenly stopped, looked back slightly, and his thoughts turned quickly. After a few seconds, he left quickly. Leaving this building, Li Ming did not return to his dark place, but turned around and walked towards the mountain. As he walked, Li Ming's face changed slightly, and he snorted softly, saying to himself, "Damn, there are too many secrets in Mayo's mind. Who cares? Let's get Hukan first." In the evening, the sky darkened. Cottrell appeared in front of a huge rock at the bottom of the mountain. He looked around and found that it was pitch black and there was no one around. After confirming that there was no one, Cottrell raised his hand and tapped the huge rock lightly. After a hum sound, a circle of blue light spread out like water ripples, and a phantom portal appeared. Cottrell smiled and walked in. The light flashed, and when he came out again, he was already in a corridor. The smooth walls had been well decorated, but some places could still show the original stone walls of the cave. This passage was the corridor built in the cave. Cottrell looked around and walked in quickly. At the end of the passage, there was nothing unusual except the wall. Cottrell stared at the cave wall with a faint light in his eyes. He stretched out his hand again, and a green light shot out from his fingertips. With a muffled sound of bang, the green light began to ripple as soon as it touched the wall. At the same time, white arcs began to jump on the surface of the wall. The arcs and the green light intertwined with each other, as if two energies were colliding with each other. Cottrell frowned slightly, stretched out his right hand gently, and slapped his whole palm on the wall. Suddenly, circles of green ripples continued to spread out from the palm of his hand. The ripples were like light water waves, constantly purifying the jumping arcs. After a few circles of ripples, the white arcs disappeared completely, and the original wall flashed and disappeared. Cottrell smiled slightly, and walked in directly. After passing through this door, he came to a huge circular room. After just a rough glance, Cottrell frowned. In the center of this circular room, a magical beast was lying. This monster had 3 long heads, a pair of wings on its back, 4 sharp claws, and a long tail. As soon as Cottrell appeared, the monster looked over here. As soon as it saw Cottrell, the monster immediately stood up, lowered its 3 heads slightly, and let out a low roar of submission. Cottrell's originally slightly changed expression gradually recovered, and he smiled and walked straight over. After passing by the beast, there was another corridor in front of him. Cottrell walked over quickly. The end of this corridor was the same as before, still a sealed wall. After Cottrell's eyes took a rough look, he quickly stepped forward, raised his right hand and gently patted it. The green ripples spread out again with his palm as the center, but this time, purple arcs jumped on the surface of the wall, which was more powerful than before. Cottrell frowned slightly, and suddenly exerted force with his palm. The frequency of the green light ripples suddenly increased, like a continuous sound wave. Each layer of light circle weakened the purple arc a little. After more than 10 seconds, the arc completely disappeared. As the purple arc disappeared, the wall also disappeared with a buzz. Cottrell nodded with satisfaction and walked in. Passing through this door, he came to a closed room. In the center of this room was a purple metal box. The box was 1 foot long and wide, and was basically the same as the box that Li Ming had seen before. The difference was that the surface of this box exuded a more weird smell. The smell was unusually strong, as if the box was emitting purple smoke. The metal box floated in the air of the room, motionless, extremely weird. In addition to this box, there were 3 shelves in front of the surrounding walls. These 3 shelves were either filled with star bags or various utensils and materials. Cottrell just took a rough glance and showed surprise, but his eyes finally returned to the floating box. He took a few quick steps to the front, raised his right hand gently, and beams of blue light shot out from his palm, covering the entire metal box. After a few seconds, the metal box flickered slightly, and then disappeared on the spot. After putting the box away, Cottrell turned around, and came to the shelf next to him, and began to check the things on the shelf. It's okay to get the Hukang star card, but you want to get something else. You are ambitious. A familiar voice came immediately, which startled Cottrell, who was standing by the shelf. He hurriedly looked back, and saw a person standing at the door of the room. It turned out to be Cottrell. Cottrell at the door looked at Cottrell by the shelf and said, "Show up." At this time, Cottrell by the shelf looked at the other person intently, and finally smiled helplessly, shook his head gently, and his body suddenly flashed with blue light. After a twist, he turned into Li Ming. Seeing Li Ming's unfamiliar appearance, Cottrell, who was standing at the door, showed a puzzled look, and looked at Li Ming carefully again, and walked a few steps to the side, but his eyes never left Li Ming. Since he had been seen through by the other party, Li Ming naturally had nothing to hide, so he showed up directly. Li Ming's eyes moved around, first looking at Cottrell, then looking at the door, his thoughts turning quickly. Li Ming's move was also seen by Cottrell. Cottrell smiled lightly, walked a few steps away again, and said, "Don't worry, I'm the only one who can come to this place. Of course, you are an exception." Li Ming looked calm when he heard this and smiled at Cottrell, saying, "Did you know that I was coming here a long time ago?" Cottrell hesitated for a moment, thought for a few seconds, and replied, "You can say that, just like you know this place of mine. The relationship between us is mutual." Li Ming's face suddenly changed when he heard this, and he looked at him closely and said, "Have you learned Hukong?" Cottrell shook his head slightly, looked at Li Ming with his eyes, smiled slightly, and said, "No, that's not suitable for me, but from your question, you don't seem to know much about the 6th domain Mang star." Li Ming's brows shrank, and he stared at the other party without saying a word. With Li Ming's current knowledge, his knowledge of the 6th domain Mang star directory is indeed limited. Seeing that Li Ming remained silent, Cottrell continued, "The 6th domain star is divided into 6 parts. It is said that it was developed by an advanced spiritual civilization. The true place of origin is unclear, but the use of the 6 star classes is very particular. For example, Huan is the most suitable star class for spiritual civilization cultivation. The Hukong you just got is the most suitable for wisdom civilization cultivation. Each star class has a corresponding civilization, so that the power of the star class can be maximized. As a biological civilization, the star class that suits me best is naturally Huling. Unfortunately, I got Hukong." At the end, Cottrell sighed slightly, seeming very dissatisfied. Chapter 374, Invitation from a Genius. Li Ming listened carefully and looked at the other party with his eyes cautiously, not daring to relax at all. Cottrell was also in a completely leisurely state, as if everything was under control. He came to the shelf, picked up a star bag casually, and said while watching, "Regarding Hukong, I only dared to learn some superficial abilities. You also let down your guard in front of me, which gave me a chance, otherwise my loss would be too great. From the look of you, you should not be with those people in the Milky Way." Cottrell continued. Li Ming narrowed his eyes slightly when he heard this, but he had to admit that he did relax his vigilance when he was sure that the other party did not have the mental defensibility of Hukong, which made the other party discover his intention. The use of advanced civilization is naturally not as simple as that of low-level civilization. When Li Ming was still a low-level civilization, he was even comparable to Moore's Hukong ability, but now it is naturally completely different. The other party has a 1.3 level civilization, which is the top of the first interval of the first level civilization. Its strength and cognition are certainly not something Li Ming can understand. Even if he only learned the superficial aspects of Hukong, he can still play a role. After thinking quickly in his mind, Li Ming's mood completely relaxed. After a slight smile, he said, "So, should I call you Meo? Or Cottrell?" Cottrell's expression suddenly changed, and the look in his eyes when he looked at Li Ming also changed a little, but he still smiled slightly and said, "Are you spiritual civilization?" Li Ming did not reply directly, but smiled faintly and said, "Since we are talking about this, I might as well mention some past events. Did you deliberately add other materials to Larson's Ringsu?" Li Ming's sharp gaze pierced through the other's body like a sword. As soon as he brought up this matter, Cottrell was also excited. Seeing Cottrell's reaction, Li Ming was more certain that what his wisdom eyes saw from his brain was indeed true. After a light snort, he continued, "I know too many secrets about you. In front of my wisdom eyes, your past is all vivid in my mind." Wisdom eyes? Cottrell's face changed drastically, and his eyes trembled slightly. He originally thought that Li Ming only possessed spiritual civilization and could explore his cognition, but he did not expect that he also possessed wisdom eyes. Being able to possess spiritual civilization and wisdom eyes at the same time is certainly surprising, but after a few seconds, Cottrell's expression immediately returned to normal, and he said, "No wonder, spiritual civilization plus wisdom eyes are really powerful enough." Having said that, Cottrell put the star bag in his hand back on the shelf, walked a few steps again, and said, "Since you know everything, you should know my strength better. Follow me, I will make you stronger, and satisfy you with anything you want." Cottrell opened his arms and said loudly. Li Ming looked uncomfortable, but he didn't say a word. He moved slightly, and took 2 steps towards the door, but soon stopped again, with a thoughtful expression. Seeing this, Cottrell suddenly stretched out his right hand, and a blue light flashed in his palm. A green pill appeared in his hand, and then he threw it to Li Ming. Li Ming raised his hand to take it. With just a slight sense, he recognized that it was the soul refining pill containing the other party's consciousness, and it was exactly the same as the one Tan Jing took. HMPH. Li Ming snorted, and shook his head slightly. Seeing this, Cottrell's face changed slightly, and he continued, "Look at me with your wisdom eyes. I sincerely invite you. This soul refining pill can improve your strength. As long as you can follow me, I will provide you with this kind of pill continuously. Don't you want to be powerful?" Li Ming then waved, and threw the pill back. Cottrell took it, and immediately showed an unhappy look on his face, but after hesitating for a moment, he continued, "Now in the whole world, only I can create Ringsu, and enter a more advanced civilization. Only I can satisfy you. And my latest experiment can perfectly transfer your consciousness and energy to other life forms. Even if you want to have the body of a silicon-based life form, or the ability of aerospace civilization, I can do it." Cottrell continued. Li Ming just looked at the other party quietly and said coldly, "Mr. Mayo, the genius master in biological civilization, is really extraordinary." Cottrell smiled disdainfully and replied, "Genius? I just have a talent for perceiving things in an unconventional way. Creativity is invention, experimentation, growth, adventure, breaking rules, and making mistakes. But there is no doubt that creativity is our most important resource. Without creativity, there will be no progress, and we will always repeat the same pattern. Do you want that?" As Cottrell spoke, he opened his arms again and said, "Come on, follow me. I will take you to appreciate a different world, and create a world where we control the rules." If there were no spiritual civilization and wisdom, these words could completely move Li Ming, but under the wisdom, the other party's evil deeds kept emerging in Li Ming's mind. With a glimmer in his eyes, Li Ming directly replied, "I have no intention of going along with you." As soon as these words came out, Cottrell slowly put down his hands. His face instantly turned cold, and his eyes looking at Li Ming were full of indifference and anger. "I respect your choice, but I also tell you responsibly that you have made the most wrong choice in your life," Cottrell said lightly. There seemed to be nothing unusual in his relaxed tone, but the content of his words had already revealed his murderous intent. Li Ming had foreseen it. Before the other party could make a move, he suddenly waved his right hand, and a golden arc of light shot out. Bang! A muffled sound was heard, and Cottrell raised his hand lightly. A transparent liquid wall formed in front of his palm. Li Ming's golden lightning struck it, and disappeared in a huge sound. The liquid wall in front of Cottrell's palm was transparent and round, like water. The golden lightning was powerful, but it disappeared as soon as it came into contact. Li Ming's face changed slightly, and he turned and ran out of the cave. Seeing Li Ming's urgent steps to escape, Cottrell was calm and walked towards the place where Li Ming escaped. At the same time, he raised his right hand and pressed lightly on his left shoulder. The red light spot on the left shoulder flashed. At the same time as this light spot flashed, in the portal in the dark building, the spider monster suddenly stood up from the cave floor, and the silicon-based life in the huge crystal block suddenly opened its eyes. Tan Jing, who was in the attic, also looked at the portal. It was as if the button responded to the three people. At this time, Li Ming had just arrived in a round room. The three-headed monster in this room shook its head and tail, spread its wings, and roared at Li Ming. Li Ming had no intention of fighting, not to mention that there was Cottrell behind him. Looking at the door in the distance, he silently said, "Instant light." The figure flashed and disappeared on the spot. The next moment, he arrived at the door. The figure reappeared, and Li Ming did not dare to stop for a moment, and continued to walk out in a hurry. At this time, the three-headed monster did not react at once, and his head shook around but still could not find Li Ming's figure. However, Cottrell had already arrived in this room. Looking at the door where Li Ming escaped, raised his right hand, and transparent water drops appeared in his palm, and then bang! A powerful shock wave shot out. Boom! A violent sound was heard. From the outside, the mountainside of the huge mountain had exploded, as if someone was blasting in the mountain. Rocks flew everywhere, and dust rose up. The whole mountainside seemed to be submerged in dust. and in the dust, a figure flew out and ran straight into the distance. That figure was Li Ming. And the next moment, a huge figure also flew out from the dust. It was the three-headed beast that was more than 10 meters long. It flapped its wings and ran towards Li Ming. At the same time, there was another figure on the back of the three-headed beast. It was Cottrell. Li Ming did not dare to hesitate or stop at all. He accelerated his flying speed and flew straight to the distance on the planet. Under the night sky, Li Ming just wanted to escape from this construction area, but it was obvious that this was not an easy task. At this time, the other three figures had already locked onto Li Ming. They were Tanjing, Spider-Man, Mace, and silicon-based Life McCall. Of course, there was more than that. In the nearby bases, large and small spaceships and aircraft took off one after another, all rushing towards this side. The momentum was no less than an interstellar war. Li Ming flew towards the edge of the construction area little by little. Before he got close, he looked around and found something wrong. The entire construction area and the surrounding area were full of aircraft. With Li Ming's flying speed, it was absolutely impossible to compare with those aircraft. Chapter 375. Now is not the time. A huge encirclement net gradually closed in, completely controlling Li Ming in the airspace above the construction area. It was too late to escape at this time. Li Ming suddenly fell to the ground and headed straight for the construction area on the ground. Although the speed of flying in the air was slow, the speed of flying to the ground was extremely fast. After all, there was the gravity of Mayo Iron Star. The most important thing was that there was a construction area below, and the enemies around did not dare to attack easily. Under the night sky, only a black shadow flashed, and Li Ming's figure was like a stone, and he disappeared into the construction area in a whoosh. Bang! A muffled sound of falling was heard, as if something heavy had hit the ground from a high altitude, and the bricks on the ground collapsed. Li Ming's figure half crouched on the ground, and the aliens around him retreated far away. At the same time, a large number of soldiers from the distance on the ground also rushed over. Li Ming aimed in a direction and ran away. But before Li Ming ran far, a huge black shadow flew down from the sky. Li Ming's running figure suddenly stopped, and when he looked up, it was the spider monster Mace. Li Ming's eyebrows shrank slightly, and he swung his right hand towards the sky. A lightsaber broke through the air and slashed directly at the top of his head. Mace's two claws then intertwined to form an X shape, and with a loud snap, they collided with each other. It was like two weapons colliding with each other. Mace's claws were extremely hard, and Li Ming's lightsaber naturally couldn't do anything about it. When the two collided, powerful energy spread out. Although it couldn't do anything to the other party, the powerful impact directly pushed the giant spider Mace away. Mace opened his mouth, revealing sharp teeth, and a ball of sticky purple liquid spurted out of his mucus-covered mouth with a puff sound. The purple liquid was extremely fast, and the attack was unexpected. Although Li Ming had foreseen it, he was too late to dodge it. He swung his right hand again, and the lightsaber slashed out. The 2-meter-long lightsaber whooshed into it, but Li Ming's face changed as soon as the lightsaber touched it, just like a sharp weapon slashing into a ball of mucus, unable to cut it off at all, but embedded in it. This was completely different from what Li Ming had expected. The sticky purple liquid wrapped around the lightsaber and continued to fly towards Li Ming, as if it was going to wrap around Li Ming as well. Li Ming was shocked and quickly let go of the lightsaber. At the same time, a golden light flashed outside his body, which was the golden light of the magic shield. With a light pop sound, it was like a ball of mud hitting a piece of glass. The golden light shield completely blocked the purple liquid, but the liquid was also flowing and spreading a little bit to completely wrap around the golden light shield. Li Ming jumped and retreated more than 10 meters away. Mace, who was far away, turned over and lay on the side of a building, looking at Li Ming coldly. Li Ming glanced at the other party and returned his gaze to the purple liquid in front of him. He saw that the purple liquid wrapped up the golden light shield and lightsaber after a while of flow. The lightsaber and magic shield were both energy forms, not physical objects, and basically could not be controlled by any material. However, the scene in front of Li Ming overturned these perceptions. The purple liquid was like an amber, and the lightsaber and the magic shield were inside it, and their shapes had not changed at all, which was extremely strange. It would be troublesome if I was stuck by that liquid. Thinking of this, Li Ming narrowed his eyes and looked at Mace again. After taking a fierce look at him, Li Ming turned and ran away from behind. At this time, Li Ming did not want to face this enemy directly. Just after running a few steps, a figure more than 3 meters tall in the distance was walking towards Li Ming step by step. It was the silicon-based Life McCall. "You are under arrest, man," McCall said in a rough and low voice. Li Ming gritted his teeth, glared at the other party, and whispered, "Arrest your sister?" As soon as the voice fell, Li Ming turned around and ran in another direction again. At the same time, a whoosh 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 sound suddenly came from the sky, and purple objects flew over. It was Mace who was lying on the high-rise building who sprayed it, but these purple liquids were relatively small, like eggs. Although smaller in size, it is faster and denser. Mace's mouth is like 10 automatic rifles, and dense bullets are flying like raindrops. Li Ming can only dodge while using the magic shield to block. McCall, who is not far away, suddenly opened his eyes a little wider, took a step, and rushed towards Li Ming. Seeing McCall preparing to attack at close range, Mace's shooting suddenly stopped, and his 6 legs kicked hard, flying towards Li Ming like a bouncing insect. Bang! With a heavy landing, Mace jumped in front of Li Ming, and McCall behind him also came together, and the two formed a pincer attack on Li Ming. Mace was in front, McCall was behind, and there were high-rise buildings on both sides, which made Li Ming's face gradually gloomy. At this time, high in the sky, Tanjing was standing in the air, but his face kept changing. He looked at Li Ming below for a while, and then looked at his hands. He wanted to take action but was hesitant. The body's command was to attack Li Ming, but the brain's consciousness rejected the body's command, which made Tanjing hesitate to act. Just when Tanjing was hesitant, a huge figure suddenly flew over. "Tanjing, why don't you act?" Cottrell stood on the 3-headed beast and looked at Tanjing coldly. Tanjing's eyebrows slightly raised, looked at Li Ming below, and then looked at his own hands. His eyeballs kept trembling in his eye sockets, but he couldn't do it. Tanjing hesitated, but there was a constant rumbling sound on the ground. Mace and McCall launched a crazy attack, and Li Ming kept jumping to avoid it. With their wisdom and sharp body movements, the two could not do anything to Li Ming for a while. Of course, this is not that the two really can't do anything to Li Ming, but Li Ming is inside the construction area. Once he uses a huge destructive ability, it will also be a huge loss to the entire construction area, and these buildings also have many important institutions. In this way, the ability of Mace and McCall is also limited. All of this was naturally seen by Cottrell. He looked at Tanjing, who was reluctant to take action, and said with a bit of displeasure, "Are you disobeying my orders now? Don't forget, only I can make you stronger." As soon as he said this, Tanjing's eyes suddenly widened a little, as if the hatred in her heart was ignited. A fierce flame burned on her body, and her hands clenched into fists. Cottrell laughed slightly and said, "Yes, that's it. Kill that kid, just to make you stronger. Only in this way can you get revenge." Tanjing said nothing, but her eyes were already flashing with cold light. After looking down, she immediately locked onto Li Ming's position. The short hair on her forehead fluttered slightly, and her figure disappeared from the spot with a bang. At this time, Li Ming was still running around in the construction area, avoiding the pursuit of the two people behind him. Li Ming was not really afraid of these two people. In Li Ming's view, the biggest threat was Cottrell and Tanjing. Compared to Cottrell, Tanjing was better off. After all, the pills that Tanjing took were already Li Ming's consciousness. Without a good way to escape, Li Ming would not act rashly. Li Ming, who was running, was suddenly startled. A dangerous message entered his mind. Li Ming paused and looked up. He saw flames everywhere, as if a fireball was flying. Just when Li Ming was distracted, Mace behind him seemed to have seen the opportunity and stabbed Li Ming's back with a sharp claw. The two attacks arrived almost at the same time. Li Ming quickly gathered enough energy and activated the golden light of the magic shield to wrap himself up. Boom. A loud noise was heard. Looking down from the sky, it was as if a bomb exploded in the construction area. Cottrell in the sky looked at this scene with a satisfied smile. Dust and smoke spread with the explosion, blocking the view, but a painful cry of "ah" was still heard from inside. Hearing this painful cry, Cottrell's face changed slightly, his smile disappeared, and his eyes looked down more intently. The smoke gradually dissipated, and Li Ming's position was safe and sound, while Tanjing punched Li Ming in front of him, and a huge deep pit appeared on the ground, and a broken spider leg. End of this chapter. Thank you very much for reaching the end. Don't forget to like. Looking for more exclusive content and immediate access? Subscribe to our Patreon. Remember, every like, subscription, or donation encourages us to continue. Thanks to everyone. See you in the next video.